remind you about your phones and so on, so we're not disturbed. Just before we get into the evidence of the Architectural Heritage Society of Scotland, I'll just sort out the timetabling. We've heard back from Mr. Harrison, who is not able to be here on Thursday, but can be here on Monday. So before we finalise that part of our programme, can I just check with you, Mr. Steele, that you still consider that we might be done by Thursday evening, as best as you know?
As President advised, yes, sir. Things can change, obviously, but yes, that's my best guess at the moment.
On that assumption that we can finish, then the sensible thing would be to put Mr. Harrison on Monday morning, and our current view is that first thing on Monday, unless anybody sees any issues with that. Okay. That's good. Okay. Anything else anyone wants to raise today before we start? In that case, Ms. Coburn, over to you.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Mr. Lowry. Could you please read the introductory and concluding sections of your precognition?
Certainly. Good morning, everyone. My name is John Lowry. I am Senior Lecturer in Architectural History at the University of Edinburgh. Fuller details of my experience are given in the AHSS Inquiry Statement, Appendix 2. I am providing evidence on behalf of the AHSS as an independent witness. I hold no position in the organisation, and I am not a member. However, I was involved in Casey's panel work for the AHSS when I was a student in the 1980s, and I was editor of their academic journal, Architectural Heritage, in the mid-1990s. This precognition and the related topic paper deal with the history of the building and the site, and therefore are more usefully structured around the appellant's heritage statement. The more precise relationship with specified matters 1 and 3 is outlined in the conclusion to my topic paper. It is the position of the AHSS that the appellants have misunderstood some of the history and context of the Hamilton buildings, with consequences for the design solutions proposed. This applies to both schemes in relation to specified matter 1, in that its special interest and relative importance have not been fully elucidated and in places misunderstood. Its role within its wider setting similarly has been interpreted in a limited way, and the understanding of the building, both in relation to the city and to the hill, have been misinterpreted in places. This also applies to both schemes in relation to specified matter 3. Both schemes effectively demonumentalise the building and expose it as the small object it actually is. Moreover, there is one key aspect of the history of the building and its fabric which is almost ignored. The Royal High School is also a Parliament building and is fitted out as such. It is very unclear either how this has been taken into account in assessing the significance of the building or what the fate of the movable interventions will be. Therefore, I conclude that the historical analysis provided by the Heritage Statement provides an insufficient basis on which to base the major interventions that are proposed in both schemes, because it does not fully address the international value of the building in its site and wider setting, both geographical and cultural.
Thank you, Mr. Lowry. I have some questions arising from the evidence that has been given thus far. Were you present for Professor Taverner's evidence?
For some of it, yes, and I caught up with the rest on the stream.
So you'll be aware that he was not surprised that you undertook historical research for the Scottish Parliament project. Could you expand a little on your role and what you found?
Yes, okay. As a consequence of work I did on the Calton Hill, I was invited by Historic Scotland to tender for a research contract in the very early stages of the Parliament project in 1998. The job was, first of all, to research the gardens of Queensberry House, and that then expanded to the house and to the entire Parliament site. The work that we did, it was a team work involving architectural historian, Scottish historian, archaeologists and building archaeologists. The work that we did led to the upgrading of the building from B to A on account of its rather unique Baroque plan that was directly politically significant in relation to the Act of Union. One of the things that we discovered in the roof space of the house, because we were obviously given privileged access to what had been a building that wasn't accessible before. It was a geriatric hospital in the past. One of the things we found in the roof space was a structure which had formerly risen up above the roof of the building, because the roof was raised in the early 19th century when it was converted into barracks. And this residue of the 17th century structure was there. And it was a kind of observation room and belvedere which sat on top of the building of Queensberry House. That was a very exciting discovery which we researched and wrote up for the report.
And were you present even for the bulk of Mr. Wright's evidence?
I think I was present for all of Mr. Wright's evidence. Yeah.
And you will recall, therefore, that I asked Mr. Wright about the referencing system within his heritage statements. Do you have any comments?
Yes, I notice this is something that has been rebutted by Mr. Wright, so I have made some brief notes. I also need to find the rebuttal. Yeah. Would it be useful if I read out the rebuttal? It's quite a brief statement. This is Mr. Wright's rebuttal of the comments I made about referencing, which were also picked up in cross-examination.
Brief sounds good to me.
Okay. The status of the heritage statement is unequivocal. It has not been prepared as a piece of academic research and is tailored specifically to serve the purpose of a planning application. As can be demonstrated in the responses that follow, all of the sources in the bibliography can be referenced fully.
Sorry, do you have a paragraph number for that?
That's 2.3. It's page 5 of the rebuttal
Thank you.
precognition. Mr. Wright's work, in its own estimation, as we've heard several times in the inquiry so far, is different, it seems, from other pieces of historical research in that it is so embedded in the process of the production of these designs. Mr. Wright's work claims an authority over other similar work that's been done in the past. The work also, given that it is feeding into such an important development, has the potential to have very great impact. Now, in the academic world, impact for research is now rated very highly. And that is, how does your research have an effect in the real world? Mr. Wright's research is in the real world. And it has the potential to have far more impact than any of the things that I've written on the Calden Hill or the Royal House School over the years. Given that, given its authority and its potential impact, given that it also claims elsewhere that it's carried out with academic rigour, I think it is appropriate that it is then subjected to proper scrutiny so that the claims that it has made can be tested in a normal academically rigorous way. In cross-examination, he made the point that the audience was not an academic audience. It was for the ordinary person to read. Personally, I think the ordinary person can deal with Chicago footnoting myself. But in the rebuttal, we're told it's to serve the purpose of a planning application. That's a quite different audience, and that's a more technical thing. And for the purposes of a planning application, I would have thought, again, that the claims made need to be properly tested. The business of referencing comes up elsewhere in rebuttal. So, for example, on page 7 at 5.3, where he says that Stark's writings were not ignored or misunderstood, and he points to the fact that Youngson is his source. Now, there's a statement in the rebuttal which I find slightly strange, and that is, and it's just the last line of it, I'll just read it. All of the sources in the bibliography can be referenced fully. And I genuinely don't understand what that means. I don't understand what that means. If we turn to the statement about Stark and Youngson, what that seems to be saying is that because A.J. Youngson's completely standard text on the making of classical Edinburgh is in the bibliography, we are to understand that Stark is therefore referenced because Youngson talks about Stark. There is no connection between Mr. Wright's text and Youngson. No nothing leads us to Youngson or to the correct place in Youngson that covers that. And that is not appropriate referencing. That is not an appropriate backup for the authority that is claimed. This also happens, I've made a note of 2C, when we talk about the urban picturesque. So on the same page of the rebuttal, page 7, I do not agree that notions of the urban picturesque have been overlooked, blah, 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 blah. A key publication of 1953 in which the topic is introduced and is addressed at some length. Now, again, the same thing applies. First of all, what is the publication of 1953? But we track that down, and that's John Summerson's Architecture in Britain, 1530 to 1830. Again, an absolutely standard text. There is a footnote here to CD 641, production, pages 291 to 303. What that CD 641 is a single page of Summerson which does not fall within that range of pages. It's actually page 309. So it, in fact, is not. Even the footnote in the rebuttal doesn't actually lead us to the place where Summerson discusses the urban picturesque. Now, Summerson does discuss it. He has a section, a 3-page section in that chapter. The chapter is about the picturesque and the cult of styles. It's chapter 28, I think, in the 1953 version of the book. That's a very old edition of the book, I must say. He does have a 3-page section where he talks about John Nash as the architect who brought the picturesque to town. And it is actually a starting point. Summerson is very important on the picturesque. In my topic paper, I have a section, I even have a couple of illustrations, I think, in that section, where I talk about John Nash and the relationship between Stark, Nash, Hamilton, Playfair, that whole move in the early 19th century towards bringing the picturesque into town. That is not referenced in Mr. Wright's work. Nash is mentioned, I think, once in relation to Waterloo Place in London. There's nothing in the topic paper about Nash and the picturesque. And as I say, the reference here to CD 641, in fact, is not to the part of Summerson that discusses this at all. And the same criticism of the relationship between Stark and Youngson applies here. There is no way of getting from anything in the text to Summerson and to what Summerson says about Nash. So I think that stuff is quite problematic. And it leads on to some other issues. Some of them are very practical things. So in the section in CD 197 on the Belvedere, and I think elsewhere, the quote where Hamilton is quoting Stark, those are both very important things, really important things, really interesting things. There's no way of tracking them down. There's no reference for the Belvedere drawing. During Mr. Wright's evidence in a lull, I went off to the NMRS to get out the drawing to see what it actually said, because the quality of the reproduction was not good enough to see, and there was nothing to help me track down what it was. Nor is there anything to help me track down where Hamilton is quoting Stark. So there are just practical issues with things in the report that actually are very good things in the report, which are then just quite difficult to follow up. But then I think there's a final aspect to this, which is, again, for me, slightly problematic, because what we have is a document that makes statements about various aspects of the Royal High School and Calton Hill and so on. And we're never quite sure what their status is. And some of them are made with great authority. We have Hamilton snubbing Eliot. We have views that are inconsequential. We have Hamilton steadfastly refusing to do such and such a thing. Not a single one of those is actually backed up by anything. They are simply Mr. Wright saying that. And therefore there's a kind of borrowing of an authority there that actually doesn't possess. Now, in a fully annotated, properly annotated document, we would be able to see where Mr. Wright's own views were coming through. We'd be able to see that Mr. Wright was saying this was inconsequential and not someone in the 19th century, for example. So I think it's, given the importance of this document, and I think it is an important document, I think it's an important contribution, I think that is a flaw that is unfortunate.
Okay, I understand
Sir,
that you're quite...
I wonder, please, if I could seek some guidance from you. The rules for the inquiry were very clearly and fairly set out in relation to precognitions and rebuttal precognitions, and everybody had a chance to follow those rules. I have the task of cross-examining about 20 witnesses, and I have prepared on the basis of those that have conformed to the rules. Now, what has just happened, sir, is just impossible to note and impossible to follow, and places me at a significant disadvantage. I have a further fear that this is going to continue and continue with the next witness as a result of timetabling that I've been very helpfully informed about. Now, sir, is this going to be allowed to continue, which is, I won't say rambling, but significant additional evidence which I can't follow and can't take instructions on, or should properly the witness be restricted to his lodged and written evidence on which I have prepared detailed cross-examination, because it's impossible to follow this. If this is to be allowed, sir, the only thing I can suggest that would be fair is that we either ask for a copy of the notes, which quite clearly the witness has got, or we will transcribe from the webcast, and this witness could return in another day if this is to continue, when I've had an opportunity to look at, consider what he's saying and take instructions on it, because it is quite impossible to follow what's happening, sir, and it's really unfair.
Ms Coburn, just before we say anything on that.
Well, I was aware that Mr Steele was going to object to evidence in chief, because he very fairly told me this in the corridor outside this morning.
Was that before he heard what's been said?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, Mr Lowry, as I'm sure Mr Steele will find, is very full in the answers that he gives to questions, and that's Mr Lowry's style. Mr Lowry is speaking to a rebuttal precognition that was lodged by the appellants, but more importantly, Mr Lowry is speaking to evidence that has arisen during the course of this inquiry session. And my understanding of normal practice and the inquiry session rules is that in evidence in chief, any witness is permitted to talk about evidence that has arisen during the course of the inquiry. And that's exactly what Mr Lowry is doing, and that's entirely proper. If Mr Steele and his team have trouble with transcription, then of course they can look at the webcast like everybody else. But sir, we have been very short and very focused in our cross-examination, and we are dealing properly and at the appropriate time with matters that have arisen since the written evidence was produced. And I don't see that there is any unfairness in that. I think that's entirely proper and normal practice.
So just to be clear, what was the indication in the corridor was to me that there would be significant additional evidence in chief. And what I said is if it continued like that and was impossible to follow, yes, I indeed would be objecting in the hope of heading it off. Well, I've clearly failed because that's exactly what is continuing. And one or two additional questions in chief, of course, no one has any difficulty about, but it's absolutely impossible to follow, for me at least, to follow what the witness has said. And I'm very fearful that this is continuing, both with this witness and the next witness. So I'm seeking guidance now, sir, as to the best way to deal with it.
Thank you. Right, thank you. Yes, we agree that additional information being brought in now at length is not in the spirit of what we should be doing. If there are brief points that needed to be added, that's fine. If the answers can be kept fairly short, that's fine too. But if you need to go a lot further, then it would require further rebuttal and an opportunity for Mr. Steele to look at it, and would perhaps need to deal with it later in the inquiry.
And, sir, can I also make clear, while the HSS consider the matter that matters of expenses, because it would inevitably involve additional time, matters of expenses, if they wish to go down that route, may very well arise.
Well, that's something we deal with in due course. Okay. Anything else, Mr. Coburn, on that?
No, position is noted, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lowry, please do try to keep your answers brief. I know that we've spoken about this, but in Mr. Wright's re-examination, he cast some doubt on whether this is a belvedere or a folly. And Mr. Robb yesterday, in his oral evidence, described it as a folly. What's your opinion?
The belvedere is a very interesting discovery. We join an exclusive club, perhaps. I can imagine the excitement of finding that at the time that it happened. I think I've been explicit in a critique of this already, which is that I feel that what has happened with the belvedere is that it has been presented as a discovery, but it has not been properly analysed. I'll be brief here. I could be much longer. But there's a whole cultural theme in the Calton Hill about visual culture. Panopticon, panorama, picturesque, astronomy, all kinds of things, photography. That, for me, would have been an obvious thing to start talking about if you find a viewing structure. It belongs to that culture. There's nothing about that here. But more basically, why would Hamilton build a belvedere in the playground of a boys' school is one question.
So the first answer is it's a viewing platform.
No, I'm not.
Well, not got there yet.
I'm getting there. Why would he do that? And now I'll come to it, how would he do that? Because when we look at that structure, there's no floor at the Œil de Bœuf windows. You can't look out of it. And there's no platform on the top. There's no way of accessing it. So it is not a belvedere. It is very obviously not a belvedere. So I agree that it's not a belvedere. And I think that this is an area that could have been analysed in more detail.
In the oral session, we've had a lot of evidence about the importance of the approach from the west. And we have heard a lot of discussion about whether it was Hamilton's intention to make the approach from the west just as important as the approach from the east. Very briefly, what is your position about the approach from the west and how the appellants have handled it?
Well, my view on the approach from the west is that it is very important. I think it has been underplayed by the appellants, although I note that that has been rebutted by Mr. Wright. I think part of what lies behind that is what I actually think is a really interesting part of the heritage statement. I think it's SE2 on images, where there are images produced by Hamilton or by other artists and images produced by photographers, which tend to give a certain kind of image of the building, quite often not from the west. A couple are, but quite often not from the west. And I think there is a focus within most of the appellant's documents, actually not just Mr. Wright by any means. There's a focus on kind of complete views of the building, particularly the front of the building, albeit not full face views. And this analysis of images is partly used to back up that opinion, because that's the way that photographers, for example, looked at the building. But I think there's a difference between a commercial photographer or indeed an architect deciding what is the best kind of sexy view of my building on the one hand, and how we actually experience a building, and indeed how an architect designs a building to be experienced. They're not the same thing. So as far as the view from the west is concerned, I think the whole issue of the approach from the west, from Waterloo Place onwards, is really crucially important. That route starts with the framing buildings of Waterloo Place. It goes through quite a formal kind of space, architectural space. There are even niches in the walls at some point which are implying a kind of sculptural program. So I think the actual road onto the hill is very, very important. I could go further. I think it's possibly even an evocation of the Pan-Athenaic Way, but maybe that's too much for Mr. Steele. But I think that the views that we catch of the building as we come along the west are important. Now, there's a rebuttal. Am I allowed to go to the rebuttal?
If you can be very brief about it, yes.
Okay. The rebuttal, if I can find it. Which is page 6 of Mr. Wright's rebuttal. Talks about things like, and he shows 2 images. I'm not going to go to the images because we obviously don't have time to do that. He talks about marking out sight lines, which I also have done in my topic paper. They confirm that no more than 2/3 of the elevation, this is the west elevation, would have been glimpsed at any one time until the point of arrival. That's great. That's absolutely fine. That's what the urban picturesque is. As you move, and move is very important here, as you move through the townscape, as you move through the city, the building is being glimpsed. Fragments are being seen. 2/3 are being seen. That's absolutely great. Now, I don't disagree with Mr. Wright that the point where it becomes really fantastic is that point at the top of Jacob's Ladder when you turn the second bend. But the first part of that is also very important. So my view, in brief, is that I think that is an extremely important approach. You get extremely important fragmentary views, but nonetheless important views. Sorry, I just want to make one other point, because this is rebuttal. I am dealing with something that has been rebutted, so I do think I am entitled to talk to the document that has rebutted me, surely.
Make your point, I'm sure we'll be talking.
Okay, so the point is that Mr. Wright makes, which was a disappointing one, I have to say, which is that what was there in 1820...
Page and paragraph?
This is 4.5, page 6. It's still the same rebuttal about the Western approach. The point that's being made is that now relatively little is visible of the Western elevation because of stuff that's now in front of it, which is the admittedly very shaggy and mismanaged 1970s landscaping, which, as I recall, on the May site visit, no one disagreed is doomed, whatever happens to that building. So for that to be brought out to justify putting a bedroom block where all it needs is a couple of guys with a chainsaw for a couple of days, and the original intentions of the architect would then be very visible again. Those same couple of guys, or private contractors couple of guys, will probably have to do the same thing if the bedroom block is built. So I think that was a disappointing intervention by Mr. Wright, because that is just not a problem.
Okay, moving on. Mr. Maskell suggested in his oral evidence that there is a viewing platform on Carlton Hill Drive, I think it's called,
Yes.
and that this viewing platform had been intended by Hamilton, and he explained at some length why he thought that. What comments do you have?
Very interesting idea. I heard Mr. Maskell talking about it, and I heard in re-examination it being put to him that this was clearly a design intent of Hamilton. So what we, and of course he agreed with that. So what we have there is Hamilton deliberately putting in, uniquely in the building in fact, putting in a place from which to view obviously the north elevation, which for the appellants is a very important elevation. I think I would have to challenge that interpretation. I don't think it's anywhere near as certain as Mr. Maskell has suggested. The first part of that was that he has aligned what were called two pilasters, in fact two piers, because there are no pilasters there, but two piers with the outer edges of the building, or at least more or less with the outer edges of the building, and a level platform sitting in between. And so what happens is we come up the hill, it levels off, and then it goes up the hill again. But actually if you go to that space, you see it's actually slightly different to that. First of all, the alignment that Mr. Maskell talks about is actually not there. The first pier on the west does line up pretty much with the outer edge of the west wing of the building. The eastern one is nowhere near. It's about 40 foot out. I'm not being precise about the number, but it's well out. It lines up with parking space 169, and parking space 169 lines up, if anything, with the inner edge of that outer wing. So it's well out. It's also not level. At the west end, it's up to my shoulder. At the east end, it's at my ankle. But it is more level.
The pier is?
So the level coping stone of the wall from which the railings come up is level with my shoulder at the west end and my ankles at the east end. So over that 2/3 of the length of the building, there's a slope.
Just
admittedly
the wall is level, but the path is sloping. Is that?
The wall is level, but the path is sloping. Thank you. That's what I'm saying. But I nonetheless, I concede that it is more level there than it is in other places, and I'll come back to that in a second. The other thing about it is, and here I have a view of how the urban picturesque works, which is that it's something in motion, it's something oblique, it's something for the city, it's something as you're moving. And as you walk up or drive up that gentle slope, you actually can't see the Royal High School, because the railings are so closely spaced together that the oblique view, it forms a solid barrier. The only way you can see it is if you do what the appellants quite often want you to do, which is to stop and turn. Then it works perfectly well. So for me, it doesn't really work. But that, of course, leaves a question, and that is, well, then what was he doing? And I actually do agree with Mr. Maskell that there is an intent there. I just think it's a slightly different intent. And here I would refer to one of the HSS productions, I can't remember the number, which is the piece that I wrote for the RSA exhibition last year about Hamilton, Playfair and the urban picturesque. Because in that, one of the things that I discuss is Hamilton working on another sloping site. And that sloping site is the Mound, where he's proposing to build the RSA and National Gallery buildings. And what Hamilton does there, he actually publishes a leaflet on this. What he does there is he realizes that I'm building my building against a slope. That means when carriages go up that slope, up the road, they're going to seem to be coming at a kind of awkward angle flying above my building. So I need to disguise that. And how he disguised it in that case was, in fact, by taking the Royal High School octagonal domes and placing them on the back of his National Gallery building so that they hid the slope. In this case, I think he's doing something slightly different. He's kind of levelling off the road a bit so that you'll see the carriages, but at least they'll be level and they won't be flying over the top of the school. So I think it's a slightly different thing that Hamilton is doing.
Okay.
I don't think it's a viewing platform. I think it's a way of setting off the school against a road with traffic on it.
Ms. Tweedy's evidence, moving on somewhat, Mr. Lowry. Do you recall the evidence of Ms. Tweedy when she was considering Mark van Grieken's visualisation CD 596, and particularly the view from Holyrood?
Yes, I do.
I think it's, for reference, it's VP 11C04, I'm told. And Ms. Tweedy said that she wasn't sure that many folk go there, but particularly in relation to Scheme 2, you had an observation. Would you mind sharing it with the reporters briefly?
Yes. First of all, lots of people go there. I mean, look where it is. It's next to the Royal Palace, in the middle of a royal park, next to the Scottish Parliament, next to Dynamic Earth, and near the foot of the Canongate. It is an absolutely seriously populated part of the park. But leaving that aside, the more important point is to do with the hill. And what that image shows, as I recall, is that where the eastern bedroom block wraps around the east end of the hill, and we see it over the tops of the trees, what we see are 1 or 2 stories of the bedroom block. So the top 2 stories. And certainly in the visualization, what we then see is the Parthenon sitting on top of it. So the National Monument is sitting on a glass plinth in that view. Not very desirable, I don't think.
And then, finally, on this topic, you, I don't think, were present for all of the evidence of Professor Taverner. But I asked him in cross-examination about his paragraph 4.11 and an implied equivalence that could be taken between Hoskins, Gareth Hoskins, and Morales. Do you agree with Professor Taverner that the proposed hotels are not comparable with Morales' Scottish Parliament?
Well, yeah, I agree very strongly that they're not comparable. I mean, even the basic kind of programmatic stuff is so different that I think a comparison between such a sophisticated programme in the Parliament and a relatively basic one in two-bedroom blocks on either side of the Hamilton building is simply not comparable. But I thought the whole comparison actually was not appropriate, and I also thought, I must say, slightly patronising. Because what we were being led to believe there by Professor Taverner was, first of all, that the Morales building was controversial here, but not out there. So it was the parochial Scots who were not impressed by Morales. I mean, first of all, I think that's simply not true. I think at some point in Cross, he said that it was probably the expert opinion. Well, that's true anywhere. That's true of any building. If you put some big, new, challenging modern building in anyone's community, there's likely to be people spilling green ink over it. But actually, the informed opinion in Scotland was pretty much the same as the informed opinion anywhere else. And the uninformed opinion, if we can call it that, was pretty much the same as it would be anywhere else, whether that's in London or in Bath or wherever. Okay. But the more important point there, I think, is that there's an implied equivalence, which is if we were parochial enough to oppose Morales down there, now Morales is equivalent in Hoskins, the same kind of criticism can be levelled. And I don't think that's appropriate. I don't think that's what's happening here, at all.
Okay.
So
Professor
I wonder,
Taverner.
please, I wonder, sir, despite your enjoinder, perhaps not quite ruling earlier, the matter has continued exactly as it was before. It seems to me, and perhaps everybody else in the room, that the matter is continuing as it was before. And the point is this, sir, it's simply impossible to follow this from our point of view. And it's certainly impossible for me to take instructions on this, particularly when matters are being raised in relation to particular witnesses who are not even in the room.
Well, sir, if I might point out, my instructions are to ask questions of our witness that were put in cross-examination to the appellant's witness. Now, it's not my fault if Professor Taverner is not here, but this is evidence that Professor Taverner gave in answer to my cross-examination. And granted, Mr. Lowry is quite lengthy in his answers, but this is an entirely appropriate way to deal with evidence in chief. And if I might prevail with one final question in evidence in chief, I would be very grateful.
Just one moment before you go to that. It seems to me that they're very simple points with a simple answer, which I am following, Mr. Steele. I'm getting there. But there's a lot of words around these simple responses to the question. Some of it is fascinating. But,
I'm sure all of it is fascinating, sir, but the fault is mine. I simply can't follow most of it.
See what your issue is.
Well, so they're very, very, very lengthy answers, and it's impossible to note it all.
Ah, okay, right.
It just needs to be much briefer, Mr. Lowry, in a nutshell.
And simply, when you get to cross-examination, where a yes or no answer,
I mean, I know I'm
required,
inexperienced in this, but I'm an expert witness. I know about this stuff.
Right.
I've been asked questions about it, and as far as I'm concerned, I'm doing my job.
Well, let's carry on. One more question.
One more question, sir.
And one more answer.
Yeah.
And we'll see how we do.
We'll see how we get on, sir. I'm grateful. At the end of my cross-examination of Professor Taverner, we went through, in length, from 1912, the history of St Andrew's House and how we came to have the building that is there currently. And at the end of that very lengthy historical analysis, Professor Taverner maintained that, to an extent, St Andrew's House, as in Tate's St Andrew's House, was controversial. Can you explain very briefly why you disagree that Tate's St Andrew's House was controversial?
Every one of us who has commented on St Andrew's House has used the same source, including Professor Taverner, which is David Walker's magisterial study done for his 50th anniversary. It's clear from that that what was controversial about St Andrew's House was the process between 1912 and 1933. 1934, when Tate takes over, things happen very fast. Between the design being approved to building warrant was about 8 weeks. I think the appellants would be very happy if that could happen in their case. After that, there were some delays, but they were delays caused by the architect. Now, I've no doubt there was some green ink spilled in Edinburgh over that time. There would still be people who were opposed to it. But there's simply no question that Tate's St Andrew's House was not a particularly controversial building. And what the whole episode shows is not, because again there was an implication for Professor Taverner that this was another example of Edinburgh conservatism preventing a good building that eventually was recognised as a good building. It's the exact opposite of that. It was the interventions of a well-informed and engaged architectural community, including an architectural historical community, including Sir John Summerson at one point, in the earlier 30s, that caused a poor project to be improved. So that's the lesson that we take from that.
Mr Lowry, I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Coburn. Mr Steele, you'd like to cross-examine. Can I just remind the witness that where there are questions which just simply require a yes or no answer, that would do nicely. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr Steele.
Thank you, sir.
Can I just go back into my...
We'll be looking for breaks at the usual times, Mr Steele, if you can work with that. Thank you.
Indeed, sir. Thank you. Mr. Lowry, good morning, to you. Can you assist me, firstly, what are your actual qualifications?
My formal qualification is an MA in Roman history and history of art.
And do I take it that as a result of that and the extensive lecturing that you do, that you're entirely familiar with plans?
I've been an architectural historian since 1984, I think. So, yes.
Good, thank you. Could we look, please, at your main report?
Yeah.
And paragraph 11.3. That's page 39.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, do we see in that paragraph that you understood that we were making interventions into the building on or under the portico?
Sorry, this has already been dealt with. I followed this up in my precognition by acknowledging that I made an error in interpreting.
Yes, I know that, Mr Lowry, but I'd just like to ask you one or two questions.
Okay.
Do I understand that you, in writing this, thought that we were the scheme making the interventions at or under the portico?
Yes, although I think not in the way that you think. But perhaps we can clarify that.
Do you accept that that is an error?
Absolutely. I have already accepted.
Could you explain, if you're so experienced with plans, as you have been for 10, 20, 30 years, maybe longer, how you could possibly have made an error of such magnitude?
Because I looked at the wrong document as I was trying to meet the deadline for the text, and the deadline was one of the early consultation documents that you produced, rather than an actual plan.
So can we agree
So the point here is I did not look at the plan when I made that.
Well, can we agree that this is a very significant error?
It is an error that was corrected long before this inquiry started.
Yes, I understand that, but in writing this document, that was a very significant error, wasn't it?
No, it was not, because it did not materially affect the points I was making about the building. Points that I have now been unable to make in my evidence in chief.
And what you actually say about that intervention on the portico is that that would be hugely inappropriate because it would be an intervention not only in the fabric, but the significance of the building. That was your professional judgment, and I assume that remains your professional judgment in relation to an intervention at or on the portico.
I would be very unhappy to see the intervention that was visualised in the document I was looking at.
And do you understand that that's precisely the position of Mr. Wright and Mr. Taverner in relation to such an intervention?
I do understand that, yes. Yeah.
And do you realise that that's precisely the intervention that the trust scheme seeks to achieve?
I am making no comment on the trust scheme. I am not in any way involved or qualified to discuss the trust scheme. I am not commenting on the trust scheme.
Are you aware, Mr. Lowry, that that's precisely the intervention that the trust scheme seeks to
I've
achieve?
answered the question.
Are you aware of that, Mr. Lowry? Could you answer the
I
question?
am making no comment on the trust scheme.
Please don't answer that question, Mr. Lowry. I think if Mr. Steele considers the inquiry statement lodged on behalf of the AHSS, it was made clear that the AHSS, specifically to avoid duplication and save inquiry time, would not be giving any evidence on the RHSPT scheme and has not done so and has not prepared any evidence on that. So to that extent, Mr. Lowry is simply unable to help Mr. Steele.
Yep, we'll leave it like that, Mr. Steele. Thank you.
I'm happy with that, sir. I think the point is well made. I have no further questions of this witness. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. We have no questions either. Ms. Coburn, do you wish to re-examine on that question?
Yeah, just one point. You were obviously asked about this error of yours that you fairly put your hand up in your recognition and mentioned that you had made an error, and we have your explanation now for it. But you were asked if it was a very significant error. If we were to compare that alleged very significant error with a missing jail, what would you think is more important?
I would obviously think the missing jail was more important. Would you like me to expand on that?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. So this is also in rebuttal from Mr. Wright.
Sir, I don't remember, if we're now going on to the jail, in a very brief answer, as I'm sure it will be, I don't remember the issue of the jail arising in my rather brief cross-examination, deliberately brief.
Yes, I don't either.
That's fine. I have no further questions.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Lowry. Your next witness?
Yes, sir. I should say that I spoke briefly to Mr. Steele about this in the corridor when he gave me the answer that I had requested ago. And I have 3 questions for Mr. Drummond in chief, and one of them relates to an answer given by Mr. Wright in cross-examination to the very serious allegation that he has made against our clients. And with your permission, I would like to lodge an email exchange between the AHSS and the developers, including Mr. Orr, David Orr and Bruce Hare, relating specifically to the answer that Mr. Wright gave in evidence to me. Now, I understand that Mr. Steele may wish to dispute that, but if I could explain that all that this email does is confirm exactly that Mr. Wright is factually inaccurate in the error that he gave, and it is a 2-page email, that's all that it is.
Well, sir.
Has Mr. Steele seen this email? You've seen it?
No, he hasn't, sir.
No, but I'm quite happy to give that to him now.
Sir, it was mentioned to me in the corridor before we started, possibly 10 minutes before we started, that this might be happening. I have not been shown these emails. I do not know what they are. Mr. Hare, I think, may still be in the room, but other clients who were mentioned to me are not in this room and indeed, as I understand it, are not even in Scotland. If this is to be allowed at this stage, it will place me at a disadvantage, and there's no reason, as I can see, why, if this was intended, this couldn't have been shown to us and disclosed a number of days or weeks ago, if this was intended.
Well, the answer to that is quite clear.
Please let me finish. If this is to be, relied upon, there couldn't be a worst possible moment, sir, immediately before the witness is due to give evidence. So I would ask serious consideration to be given to rejecting this. If you're going to allow it, I will need time to consider it and only cause delay. It seems to relate to historical exchange of emails, which, on one view, are wholly irrelevant in any case, as far as I can understand what the position is.
Sir, if I might be allowed to correct that.
Okay.
Mr. Wright has made a very, very serious allegation.
It would help me if you could give
Paragraph
references.
6.11 of his topic paper, he alleged, and you'll remember this, sir, no doubt, in my cross-examination, that the AHSS had waged a campaign of fabrication to discredit from the outset Scheme 1. Now, I now understand from Mr. Steele that the evidence that he was anticipating that Mr. Wright would refer to doesn't actually relate to the AHSS at all. It's another body, and it doesn't actually relate to Scheme 1 either. So to that extent, the allegation is wrong, both in terms of the body and the scheme to which it relates. But more importantly, sir, Mr. Wright gave an answer in cross-examination to the point put specifically to him about this very serious allegation. And I asked over a week ago Mr. Steele whether or not he intended to pursue this matter. Now, Mr. Steele told me as I was coming in this morning, and that is why I told Mr. Steele 10 minutes before the start, because it was up to Mr. Steele to tell me over a week ago whether he intended to cross-examine on this point. And that is why Mr. Steele has been given warning about this email now. It would not be appropriate for me to lodge this email if Mr. Steele is not intending to cross-examine on the matter. And that's why I'm seeking leave to lodge it now and not earlier.
Okay, right. Mr. Steele, is that something that you were intending to do, cross-examine on that specific matter?
Sir, firstly, I don't know what's in these emails. My recollection is that Mr. Wright was asked questions about that particular paragraph and gave a particular clarification of the matter. And insofar, I can't remember the precise word, and I haven't been able to get the document in the moments available. Insofar as the precise matter in question, as I understand it, it relates to a meeting which may have been convened by the AHSS, but it relates to material I certainly now realise that was prepared by another witness at this inquiry. So what I do intend to do is to establish the meeting and have confirmed that the offending document was prepared by somebody else, not the AHSS. So the answer is yes and no to your question, which maybe doesn't help very much, sir, but it still doesn't get round the fundamental point that this arose apparently from Mr. Wright's evidence, which is 2 weeks ago, and if the AHSS wanted to rely on an exchange of emails, they have had 2 weeks at least in which to deal with this, and they cannot surely spring it on us at this moment.
Could I make a suggestion to try and overcome this impasse, sir? It is a very short email exchange. I'm quite happy to take a coffee break slightly early at 5 to 11, show Mr. Steele the very short, less than 2 pages email exchange, which makes it abundantly clear that Mr. Wright was factually inaccurate in the description or the explanation he gave for these very serious allegations that he has made against the AHSS, which are wrong, it transpires, both in terms of the scheme that is being complained of and the body that made the allegation. Now, I understand that my friend Mr. McIntosh will have some comments to make on this, but I repeat, I asked Mr. Wright at the close of his evidence, Mr. Steele rather, at the close of his client's case, whether he intended to cross-examine, because I would not have wished to have presumed to invite Mr. Steele to tell me if any of the 8 witnesses that followed were going to speak to this matter. None of them did. That was why I asked the question. Mr. Steele has delayed in giving me the answer to the question. It is arising directly as a result of Mr. Steele's intention to cross-examine on this matter. I couldn't have raised it any earlier because my powers of telepathy and seeing into the future have apparently deserted me.
Thank you for your helpful suggestion. We will take a coffee break at this point. If Mr McIntosh has anything to say, we'll hear that after the coffee break.
I hope to deal with all Mr Steele entirely. I hope to deal with the matter entirely off microphone with Mr Steele.
Good. Right. Well, we'll do that. We'll break now until, well, 11:15.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. In the interval.
I'm not sure about resolve many things, but so far as the document is concerned, sir, I actually, if the AHS wish to lodge it, I would welcome it going in. I think it assists with matters.
And the consequence of that, you're happy just to have that lodged? You don't want to?
Very happy with that, sir.
Yeah, okay. Right.
I will ask Mrs McFarlane to hand out the hard copies, and I will in due course email your office so that you have an electronic version as well, but that's two hard copies and going to everybody now. Thank you.
Don't worry. And then hopefully got a number on it. Thank you.
And so, based on my conversation with Mr Steele and what he said, I have nothing to add at this stage.
Thank you very much. So if that's where we're up to, then Ms Coburn, your next witness.
Sir, would you like Mr Drummond to read the introduction and conclusion to his recognition as to Mr Lowry, or are you content just to proceed?
Forgive me, I've forgotten the length of them. Assuming they're fairly brief, then that will be helpful.
I think they are. Mr Drummond, if you could just read from your recognition so that we know who you are and what you do and what your overall conclusions are, that would be very helpful.
My name is Peter Drummond. I'm a chartered architect accredited in historic building conservation and specialising in the heritage-led regeneration of historic sites. Fuller details of my experience are given in my topic paper. Conclusions. The proper understanding of any heritage site is the best basis for decisions about how we conserve them. We must understand buildings and their landscape or townscape context before we change them, not because we want to change them. That understanding should, in turn, be used to assess the impact of a proposed change on the special interest of the site. I conclude that, for the reasons set out above, and for each hotel scheme, 1. The research and analysis undertaken in respect of the special historical and architectural interest of the site is not sufficient as a basis for design or the assessment of the likely impacts of proposals on the site. The appellant has failed to identify in sufficient depth the importance of this internationally important site. 2. As a consequence, the proposals will have a significant adverse impact on the special interest of the listed buildings, their setting, the setting of adjacent listed buildings, the character of the old and new town conservation areas, and the garden and design landscape. 3. These significant adverse impacts are contrary to local development plan policy and to national policy and guidance. The AHSS accordingly recommends that the appeals in respect of each scheme be refused.
Thank you, Mr Drummond. I have 3 questions for you in chief. If you could perhaps be brief in your answers, that would be helpful. Were you present for the evidence of Mr Robb from Historic Environment Scotland?
I was not here, however, I watched it on the webcast.
And did you see the question from Mr Ferry about the Buildings at Risk register?
I did.
And what comments do you have on that exchange?
I concur with Mr Robb. The building is marked on the Building at Risk register as a low risk, and I find that consistent with the condition reports submitted by the appellants in support of their applications.
Thank you. Were you present for Professor Murray's evidence?
No, however, I watched that live on the webcast.
So did you see me asking Professor Murray what he meant by conservation-led, notwithstanding the very similar wording to that used by Professor Taverner?
I did.
And what do you mean by conservation-led?
I can, if it is of assistance, refer to appropriate productions. However, a conservation-led approach is one which starts by examining and understanding the value and importance of a site and what may or may not be required to maintain that historical importance. It is not a project that starts with a brief and then seeks to reconcile that brief, functional brief, the constructional brief as we would understand it in the sector, seeks to reconcile that with heritage values at a later stage.
And finally, Mr. Drummond, we've already discussed this morning the allegation made by Mr. Wright at his paragraph 6.11 of his topic paper, and we now have before us document AHSS 3030. Could you please give your understanding of the timeline that led up to that exchange between Bruce Hare, one of the appellants, and Ewan Leach, formerly of the AHSS?
Yes, I can. I was national chairman of the Architectural Heritage Society until October 2014, and there was no discussion at national or substantive discussion, as far as I'm aware, at Casey's panel level regarding the merits or otherwise of any scheme for the site prior to that point. I was succeeded at the AGM in October 2014 by Emma Griffiths. Having spoken to those concerned, I'm advised that in December 2014, my successor, the head of the Casey's panel for Lothian and Borders Group, Forth and Borders Group, my apologies, and our administrative director were afforded kindly the opportunity to tour the building in the company of, I think, Mr. Hare, who was very helpful, including the interior of the Hamilton buildings. And at that point, the Society had no position regarding the merits or otherwise. A subsequent site visit was organised with a member of the Forth and Borders Cases panel who had been involved in preparing, would be involved in reviewing any application when it came forward. And that was undertaken with a representative of the Built Environment Forum of Scotland. I believe that tour was provided by Mr. Danny Orr. David Orr, my apologies, sir. I fear, sir, you will discover that I'm not very good on names. David Orr showed him around. And at the end of that meeting, I am advised that a sheet of paper was shown at which, for the first time, it became apparent to the Society the scale of the proposals involved and the number of bedrooms, over and above anything that had been in the press hitherto. That was the point at which the Society became concerned regarding the likely magnitude of change, and as a consequence decided to organise a public meeting to which the appellants were invited, and in addition to the appellants, the email exchange was copied to key members of the design and client team. That opportunity was not taken by the appellants, although I'm given to understand that one of them spoke from the floor during the question and answer session. On that basis, and having reviewed such documents as I've been able to find in the Society and carried out an investigation with my new national chairman, I am unable to agree with Mr. Wright's assertion that neither he or his clients were invited to speak at those stages in the project.
And I'm assuming you will recall that the second reason put forward by Mr. Wright in support of his allegation was that there were articles published in the AHSS journal. Have there been any articles in the AHSS journal pertaining to this scheme, Mr. Drummond?
There have been none that I can identify.
Have there been any articles written by Mr. Wright in the journal?
There was an article published a short number of years ago by Mr. Wright regarding the early use of Portland cement in buildings in Scotland.
Thank you, Mr. Drummond. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Ms. Coburn. Mr. Steele.
Thanks, sir. Mr Drummond, can I just clear up the matter of the meetings and the, any invitations and the like, for whatever relevance it may or may not have, but it seems some are getting hot under the collar about it. Insofar as the meeting that took place in early February, I think it was, of 2015, was that in St George's and St Andrews, or St Andrews and St George's, as the case may be, in George Street?
I understand that to be the case, Mr Steele. However, I wasn't president of the meeting, and I would have to check paperwork to be absolutely definitive.
And are you aware that Mr David Orr, who you call Mr Danny On, actually spoke at that meeting?
My understanding from speaking to those who were at the meeting as part of the investigation was that he spoke from the floor during the questions and answers session.
And that, obviously, by virtue of the date, was in relation to Scheme 1. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Can I ask you to move forward in time a little bit? Was there a further meeting organised in March of 2017 in relation to the second scheme?
There was a joint meeting organised in respect of Scheme 2 by a number of amenity bodies, yes.
Right. I understood it was actually organised by AHSS alone, but is that not correct?
I have seen the marketing and publicity material for that, and it is quite clearly badged as a joint meeting of a number of different bodies, and it wasn't, for example, chaired by the Architectural Heritage Society of Scotland.
Sorry, it was or wasn't chaired?
It wasn't chaired by the Architectural.
Who did chair it?
My recollection is that it was Miss Nimmo. There.
Excellent. Good. Now, that was on the 14th of March, I believe, at a venue somewhere in Tollcross. Precise venue doesn't matter.
I wasn't present, but I see no reason to disagree with you, Mr Steele.
Right. And do you know whether within 1 month of that meeting there were nearly 3,200 and something objections lodged to the second proposal, which clearly may have been largely, if not entirely, attributable to that meeting?
Setting to one side, Mr Steele, the speculation as to whether objections arose from that meeting rather than press publicity, I've carried out no analysis of planning objections from members of the public, nor have I, to be honest, availed myself of their content in any depth.
And I don't suggest you should. I merely asked if you knew about that. Now, you were the chairman of AHSS. Were you the chairman? You've given us the date at that particular time.
I was chairman from Easter 2008 until the AGM in October 2014, when my full-time service had completed. I then stepped back from any role in National Council for a period of just over a year. And therefore, to give you a simple answer, was not involved in the first public meeting.
Thank you. I've got the dates now, Mr Drummond. Thank you. Now, I'm sure, as a past chair, you will appreciate that it's appropriate that such presentations are done on a fair, accurate and even-handed basis. Would that be correct?
Yes.
And as a matter of fact, do you know whether my clients or a representative was A, invited to that meeting, or B, spoke at that meeting?
Your clients were not, as far as I'm aware, invited to that meeting. However, Mr Steele, to go on, I asked why that might be the case, and it was put to me by members of Forth and Borders, I have to say quite compellingly, that as they hadn't been involved in the pre-application consultations undertaken by your clients, that they felt the relationship had reached the point where there was unlikely to be much benefit in it.
Is Forth and Borders part of AHSS?
Sorry, yes. I forget that Mr Steele and I will be familiar with this. The Architectural Heritage Society operates an entirely delegated system of casework responses, barring very precise circumstances. They're dealt with by the regional groups where those exist. Highland's moribund at the moment. In that case, his panel has complete responsibility for dealing with any comment on any planning or listed building consent application, unless they ask for specialist input from the National Conservation Committee, or the National Council either, or they do not object to the demolition of a Category A listed building. In all other circumstances, the National Conservation Committee and the Council can't intervene.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Okay, but whatever may or may not have been the reason, Mr Drummond, which I'm not really too interested in, the simple fact is my clients or the representatives were neither invited nor did they appear to speak.
I refer you back to my previous answer, Mr Steele. My understanding is that, if you will, it was a compliment returned from the public consultation exercise.
Well, that's some compliment, Mr Drummond. Now, several presentations were given at that, were they not?
I understand that to be the case.
And am I right to suggest to you that as a result of presentations given, certain information appeared on the website of the AHSS subsequently, from shortly after that meeting?
All of the presentations given by the bodies who attended that meeting were hosted on a section of the Architectural Heritage Society's website, yes. And
is it also right to suggest to you that some time later, when my clients realised what had happened and what was happening, they contacted the AHSS to suggest that at least one, or perhaps more than one, of the images that had been presented at the meeting was inaccurate and misleading?
That is correct, Mr Steele. By that time I was involved in the project and was made aware of the documents and can discuss them in some detail if you would like.
Well, I'm grateful for that. Let me just establish the facts first. That was, by that stage, 2 or 3 months had elapsed since the meeting.
It was, if I recall the date correctly, but I do have a copy of the. Don't have a copy of the correspondence from that in front of me. In or around August, that your clients approached the National Office.
So it had been on your website for a period, a small number of months. Is that correct?
It had been on for several months, yes.
Can we also agree that as soon as the AHSS became aware of the inaccuracy or misleading nature of the material, within a short period of time as was reasonable after investigation, the AHSS took that material off its website?
We can, and the officer that was dealing with it also engaged in quite a bit of correspondence with your clients in order to ensure that any items he wasn't content with had been addressed. So, by way of perspective, the complaint was raised on a Thursday and the matter was put to sleep by the Tuesday lunchtime. Well,
Mr Drummond, in case you're being oversensitive about this, I'm not suggesting that the AHSS acted in anything other than an entirely proper and fair manner, because within a day or two, 3 or 4 you tell me, they had removed the offending items from the website because they were misleading. Is that so?
Yes, the AHSS would take any accusation of misleading information or the like, or defamation, quite seriously.
And is it fair to say that, having examined the information, you accepted and agreed that the material was indeed misleading? You or the HSS?
Yes, but let me clarify that. On seeing the substance of the complaint raised by your client, a precautionary approach is merited. The image in question is clearly not an accurate photomontage. Your client was unhappy and felt it was unreasonable, and I did what I would do in any circumstances and took it down immediately without interrogating the matter further.
So, just to be clear, you accept it. Did you say it was an accurate or an inaccurate montage? Are we agreed it was wholly inaccurate?
Whilst we might not both use the word wholly, it's not a photorealistic montage. No.
And I mean, to be.
Excuse me, but it's not before us either, is it?
No, it's not before us, sir.
All ministers.
No. And to be frank, Mr Drummond, had the AHSS realised, they would never have been associated with producing such material in public, would they?
Well, the Architectural Heritage Society of Scotland wouldn't produce images or the like anyway. There's no provision for that within our cases, panel guidelines or operational papers. So it's a kind of moot point. You're right, we wouldn't do it, but that's because we wouldn't do it anyway.
Let me put it to you. If you were even thinking about doing it, the AHS as a reputable organisation would not be party to showing the public and asking them to take a view on inaccurate and misleading information, would it?
The internal papers and the guidance that's provided by the Society, which I just referred to, makes clear to all concerned that the sole source to be utilised are the planning and listed building consent application documents, and that has consistently, in the time I've been in Society, how it has progressed.
And can we both agree that from the AHS point of view, and no doubt your position as an architect, it would be most unfortunate if the public were influenced in making a decision as to whether to object or support an application if that was based on inaccurate and misleading information?
It is always unfortunate when publicity material from one or both parties is inevitably partisan. And I would agree with you, subject to the caveat that what is sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander, sir.
Are you suggesting that this misleading information was done deliberately in that event? Do you have knowledge of that?
No, I have no knowledge of that, and I did not suggest that, sir.
Well, we'll deal with that issue in more detail. Now, just one matter related to that, Mr Drummond, and it may be, I imagine you're wholly unaware of this, and it may be that Ms Coburn's wholly unaware of this, but are you aware that, in fact, that material is still available on the AHSS Twitter account? And if that is right, I assume that is an error.
I do not have administration rights, nor do I follow the AHS Twitter account, nor have you placed any evidence in front of me to lead me to make a comment on that one way or the other. The complaint that was raised by your client specifically referred only to the website. It was clearly from the correspondence resolved to his satisfaction. If it is still on Twitter in its entirety, that would be unfortunate, undoubtedly, should come down. But had it been raised at the time, then it would have been dealt with. It was dealt with to your client's satisfaction.
Indeed. Mr Drummond, I don't suggest anything critical of you about this at all, but can we agree this, that if it is on Twitter, then it should come down?
Sir, if I might interject at that point, Mr Drummond has answered the question that has been put. And it's a little disappointing, given the objection raised earlier today by Mr Steele, that I have not been afforded, and the inquiry has not been afforded, the professional courtesy from Mr Steele of any mentioning in advance of this line of questioning, which is not prefaced in any of the inquiry documents and is not contained in any of the inquiry documents. So whilst I'm quite happy for Mr Drummond's answer to be noted, I think it's important to note the context in which it has been given and the context in which the question has been asked.
That's fine. That's what we normally do.
Thank you, sir.
I think you've got to the end of that point.
We have indeed, sir. Mr Drummond, now we've all got that off our chests, can we please move on to the merits of the situation? Now, so far as you yourself are concerned, I think you qualified as an architect with, as it then was, Historic Scotland.
I passed my Part 3 exam in 1993 whilst an employee of Historic Scotland, yes.
And you are obviously an architect, but as I understand it, not a landscape architect or planner.
Correct.
Now, if we go to your main document, your main report, which is the topic paper, which is the only document, Mr Drummond, that I will be referring to, page 13. And can we agree that the AHSS, as a matter of principle, would support and does support bringing redundant historic buildings back into economic and social use?
It does.
And as a matter of fact, the AHSS does not get involved in issues of financial viability or social value or the economics of a particular proposal.
That is correct.
And in addition, the AHS does not and has not here taken into account or relied upon the economic advantages that there may be or the tourist advantages that there may be.
The AHSS leaves the assessment of those and the wider planning balance to others.
Yes. And for completeness, you have carried out quite correctly no appraisal of this proposal in terms of the development plan, nor indeed a detailed proposal in terms of the necessary SHEP tests either, have you?
There is commentary on both the heritage provisions of the local development plan, in, if I recall correctly, my precognition, sir, and the wider guidance, including HESPES, towards the end of my topic paper.
Well, that's why I put the question the way I did, Mr Drummond, because you haven't carried out a detailed analysis in relation to these matters. You have, of course, referred to them, but there's no detailed analysis, and I'm very much hoping to avoid asking you detailed questions about it.
In assessing the proposals, I availed myself of both the comments that the cases panel had made in respect of both both schemes, all 4 applications, and the heritage aspects of the policy documents you've just referred to, but not to the wider non-heritage and non-design issues.
Thank you. Now, let's see what we can make speedy progress about, Mr Drummond. So far as the internal alterations are concerned, you regard these to be acceptable, subject, of course, to suitable conditions, controlling materials and the like, as I understand it.
Not just yes and no, Mr Steele. Not just materials, sirs. The condition will relate to the design, the means of implementation, and the materials. The devil within the building is, as ever, within the detail.
Of course, and to be fair, that's what you say at page 15, 4.16, isn't it?
Yes, I think, my apologies, sir. I think 416 explains the balancing act that I did in that respect. So I think the internal alterations are broadly acceptable. I think the loss of the enfilade sequence to the chambers each side of the room is unfortunate in that there's some impact on legibility, but nonetheless it's a reasonable design solution having regard to bringing the building back into productive use.
And what you say in the last couple of lines is that subject to quality of the detailed design, and this is a matter that might be dealt with by conditions. I've read that short, but correct me if I've got that wrong.
Sorry, Mr Steele, bear with me for one moment while I just focus in on that. Yes, that's right. It'll depend very much upon the quality of the detailed design as the project progresses, that is, through subsequent work stages. And yes, I think that might be dealt with through reasonable, and in all fairness, probably quite detailed conditions.
And if we turn the page, you accept, and I'm not going into any detail of this, but the public realm works would have moderate beneficial impact for reasons you set out there.
Yes, I think they're a carefully selected design approach for most of the footpaths and roadways, and that the design vocabulary is generally acceptable. A few wee glitches round the edge, but yes, moderate beneficial.
In short, I suspect every architect would do it slightly differently. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, that's a truism, of course, in the same way that all lawyers would do their cross differently. But within the general accepted approaches and the expectations of quality for public realm work, yes, it sits comfortably.
Could we look, please, at Mr McMeekan's main topic paper? It'll be brought to you. I hope.
CEC 7.
If you turn to page 20 of that document, please, Mr. Drummond. And at 647, reading the matter short, Mr. McMeekin was of the opinion that demolition of the lunch block and cast-room block would have a positive impact on the setting of the building. Firstly, do you see that? And secondly, do you agree or disagree with that?
I fear, Mr. Steele, there's not a simple yes or no answer to that, although I appreciate that we want to keep things moving. The luncheon block, whilst containing no interior features, as far as I can determine from your own client's material, contains no features of interest. It's reasonably well designed. It fits in, it's polite, and it's modest. The classroom block is, I think, quite an interesting example of austerity work. I mean, obviously, the fact it's an austerity building reflects a rather important period in modern British history. But I don't necessarily equate that to these being must-keep buildings. They are of some interest. I think it's low to moderate interest rather than no interest. That said, if their loss, if their demolition was necessary to secure a viable future for the site, then, if you'll excuse the colloquialism, I probably wouldn't be losing a lot of sleep over it.
But what I think Mr. McMeekin says is that it would improve the setting to take these buildings away in isolation. I think that's the import of what he says, isn't it? I wondered if you'd agreed with that.
It is, as ever, a balancing calculation. There is both a benefit and a disbenefit. The disbenefit is that we lose information about how the site was used and how developed, including a form of carefully detailed concrete block building, or imitation stone if you wish, that tells us an important period about Britain's recent past. On the other hand, the concrete building probably can't be economically saved. Dealt with structures of that type in construction before. And the classroom block, the luncheon block is tucked away in a manner that means its loss will have a relatively minor impact on the legibility of the site as a whole. So I think, on balance, as part of a wider scheme, yes, there are advantages to it, but I flag up again that in terms of understanding the history of the site as a whole, there are some modest negatives.
So, in summary, if I can try and summarise your position, is this that these are not must-keep buildings? I'm not sure. Is that microphone working? I'm not sure. Yes, yes. No, I was more worried about mine actually at the moment, Mr. Drummond, but it seems to be working. Right. So, firstly, these are not must-keep buildings, and secondly, on balance, the answer is yes, in the wider interest.
They are of not so much secondary as third-tier significance within the site, although they tell apart as a whole, and if their demolition and loss is necessary to secure a viable use for the site, then I don't see a problem with that.
Good, thank you. Now, 5.17 and 5.18 of your proof at page 20, if I may take this broadly, you agree with Mr. Wright, I think it is, that an amended methodology may be of assistance, having drawn attention to some issues you may have with the ICOMOS guidance. Is that a fair summary?
Bear with me, please, Mr. Steele. 517 and
518 at page 20 of your main document.
If you just give me a second, please. I think we have to place that in context, Mr Steele. What I say is that, in my opinion, the ICOMOS guidance is primarily based on the impact of proposals on the overarching OUV of the World Heritage Site, and therefore doesn't necessarily represent a sufficiently fine tool to measure the impacts on individual sites and their immediate settings. Therefore, there is a need to assess that impact on those at a more localised level, using an alternative methodology. And insofar as that goes, I accept that an amended methodology may be of assistance. And then you note I go on to caveat it as you highlighted yourself.
Thank you. Now, can I just question the building at risk? Do you think it unfortunate, as a conservation architect of considerable experience and having worked for Historic Scotland as well, unfortunate to say the least, that a building of this importance is on the building at risk register, for whatever reason?
With respect, Mr Steele, I think that question has to be placed in context. The building at risk register has a number of categories, from what we might broadly categorise as low risk right through to imminent risk. Those aren't the precise terms, but they'll do as a shorthand today. Now, if a building is important and has no beneficial use, it's almost certain to meet the eligibility criteria for inclusion on the list, but that will be at low level because the building isn't necessarily in a dilapidated condition or a poor condition. There's a big difference between a Royal High School and a Lennox Castle, to throw some well-publicised names on the table. Therefore, are we still here? Good, yes. Therefore, whilst I think it should be included at the building on the building at risk register pending a sustainable end use, I don't necessarily take fright at its inclusion in there or view that as some sort of major issue. It is there because that is the way the rules are set up.
And to continue in a similar vein, from your professional perspective, surely the sooner that building is off the buildings at risk register, the better, surely.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to frame my response from that slightly differently from it. I suspect where you intended it to go, sir. So bear with me, please. The best way of caring for our built heritage is to find compatible, sustainable uses. That's been set down in policy since MPPG 18, paragraphs 20 to 23, if anybody's interested. However, that's one thing. That is not to say that the decision on whether or not to put a use into a building can place in the proverbial back seat the impact that the proposals might have on the building. The question is not a use at any cost. It's a question, it's not even at reasonable cost. It is the balance that has to be struck. Now, if we had one of these unfortunate buildings that dot the Scottish press with alarming regularity, which are at precarious and imminent risk of loss, then one might naturally accept a greater degree of intervention than might hitherto been the case to secure them. But that takes us into a consideration of what is the level of risk posed to the building at any given time. I'm not going to go much further with that unless you want me to, Mr Steele, because I think that takes us into the conditions surveys, and that's perhaps not where you see this evidence going. So
that's helpful. But as a matter of generality, and I'm deliberately not getting into the detail, Mr Drummond, it must be right, must it not, to try to seek to secure a building that is an important building, an A-listed building, and its removal from the buildings at risk register. As a matter of principle, obviously not at any cost, because there may be costs that would be too great, but that would be a factor in favour of a proposal such as ours, which will remove it. I'm not saying it's the end of the matter.
It was hitherto a performance indicator for the Scottish Government that we would remove buildings from the building at risk register, with particular emphasis on Category A buildings. if we weren't keen to remove buildings from the risk register, what would be the point of having a building at risk register? Now, I'm going to take you back to your previous comment where you said at any cost. I'm going to caveat that because it's not at any cost. We have taken, there is a balance to be struck on a wide range of issues. There might, and I'm not necessarily suggesting that this applies in its entirety to your client's applications, but clearly at some stage the level of intervention required would so fundamentally undermine the reasons for designation in the first place that one would question whether or not one would wish to pursue that approach. Therefore, we have to look at the applications for any site in their totality.
Well, Mr Drummond, I think I may not have made myself clear. Let me make my position absolutely clear, which is this, and I pose the question to you again, that removing a building such as this from the building at risk register is a factor in favour of our proposals, but equally, that should not be done at any cost, because there may be a cost that's too important.
I'm quite happy with my previous answer on that, Mr Steele.
Right.
Can I interrupt just for a minute, Mr Steele? Can anyone help us with whether or not we have the relevant extract of the buildings at risk register? I had a quick look for it yesterday and couldn't identify it. Is it hidden within another document?
My recollection is... Oh, sorry, Mr Steele.
You go, Mr Drummond.
My possibly flawed recollection, Mr Ferry, is that it's an AHS production, but I must admit that I'm quite lazy and just look up the register when I need it.
We can't do that.
We do have it, sir.
I think if it would help, it will be in the documents that are core documents that you, CMS, asked us to provide. I think it's in that, if that would assist in pinning it down.
I think it's in actually our heritage impact assessment, which indeed it is. If we look at CD 198,
I think it's probably better, Mr Steele, if we go to the actual document itself to make sure that it's entirely accurate.
I don't think we need to see it just now, but if someone can give us the relevant reference at some point today, that would be helpful.
Sir, I can give you a ref 198, Appendix 9.1, which I believe is an extract of the entry. If the accuracy of that is challenged, then Ms Coburn will direct you to a better one. But I believe that that is the correct extract.
Thanks, I'm obliged.
Mr Drummond, just for completeness, can we just go to 198, which I think you've possibly just been handed anyway?
Page number, Mr Steele?
It's the appendix right at the back. Appendix 9.1. It's some half a dozen pages from the end of the document.
Yes, I have it, sir.
And I think, subject to correction, I think that actually is an extract from the register, is it not?
And there are certainly sections I recognise, sir, yes. Yes, the web address seems to be accurate.
Mr Drummond, you are an architect with very considerable experience in conservation matters. I think that would be fair to say, wouldn't it?
Tempted as I am to suggest I'm merely very old, I think it would be fair to say it's my entire career has been in heritage-led conservation. Heritage-led regen or conservation, yes.
Drawing these two factors together, I think you're hugely experienced in that case, Mr Drummond.
I wouldn't put it that way.
Right. But are you aware, therefore, that in making the decision, one will have to balance, that is the decision on planning and listed buildings, one will have to balance all the factors, some in favour and some again. Some will involve detailed financial issues of viability and the advantages that flow from the proposal of a financial nature, about which AHSS, quite rightly, are making no comment. Is that so?
I am well aware of the wider planning balance, yes.
Mr Drummond, thank you for your very fair evidence. Thank you. It's appreciated.
Thank you, Mr Steele.
If I might just say, one of my colleagues has very kindly presented me with it, the Buildings at Risk Register's document CD538.
As a separate document. Thank you.
I just have a CD538 number not used in my copy set, so maybe it can be chased down.
Well, is that a different version from the one in 198?
I have no idea, sir.
So I'm hoping that there's only one.
No, well, I wondered whether it was an extract.
No, well, indeed, I'm just wondering what's wrong with our one, so to speak.
Well, it might have been to avoid duplication.
If there's an error in the document that we've lodged, that they're required to lodge another one, and if so, we should explore that.
But, well, that's the only thing I'm worried about. But normally we ask not to duplicate documents. That might be the reason.
I'm being told, sir, that this version includes all the ancillary.
Whatever, as long as someone checks it one against the other and lets us know if there's any difference, that would be helpful. I don't think I've got any. The reporters have no questions for you, Mr Drummond, thank you. Ms Coburn, do you want to re-examine your witness?
Just one question, sir. You were asked about whether it was a benefit that the building would be brought back into beneficial use. Could you have a look, please, at SPP, which is CD 459 in paragraph 15, please?
I not only have it, Ms Coburn, but I'm familiar with it, having used it at another inquiry recently.
OK, Mr Drummond, just for this inquiry's purposes, please, could you read paragraph 15?
The SP... Excuse me. The SPP sets out how this should be delivered on the ground. By locating the right development in the right place, planning can provide opportunities for people to make sustainable choices and improve the quality of their life. Well-planned places promote well-being, a sense of identity and pride, and greater opportunities for social interaction. Planning, therefore, has an important role in promoting strong, resilient and inclusive communities. Delivering high-quality buildings, infrastructure and places in the right locations helps provide choice over where to live and style of home, choice as to how to access amenities and services, and choice to live more active, engaged, independent and healthy lifestyles.
In your professional opinion, Mr Drummond, does either Scheme 1 or Scheme 2 represent the right development in the right place?
It is the wrong scale and size of development for that sensitive site. One might argue the merits or otherwise of the architectural fenestration till the cows came home. However, the fact is that it is simply too big and too prominent.
Thank you, Mr Drummond. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Look at my timetable. 12:04. Okay, thank you very much. Mr McIntosh.
Yes, my next witness is Dr. Carter McGee, and she is going to read her precognition. And I was going to ask her a couple of questions we went through. So I wonder if we might do the reading before lunch and then cross-examine afterwards, if that was convenient to Mr. Steele.
That
That seems a reasonable way forward. Thank you.
So we might actually be able to do both.
I think we might be able to cut it down before lunch.
Depends
Well-
how long the evidence in chief is, but it's only 12:05.
Well, let's review when we've got to that point. This is the Coalition's case, if I can call it that, but that's the Edinburgh World Heritage.
Yes, so it's the Edinburgh World, it's the Coburn Association, the Edinburgh World Heritage and the Newtown and Broughton Community Council. And as currently advised, my structure is to start with Dr. Carter McKee, then hear from Mr. Wilkinson, and then tomorrow from Mr. Price, who's the Vice Chairman of the Community Council, and Mr. Leventhal.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Carter McKee, if you could have to hand your recognition. Could I ask you to read it? And there are a number of points where I might stop you and ask you a question about evidence, matters that have arisen in other people's evidence.
My name is Dr. Kirsten Carter McKee. I am an architectural and urban historian with a speciality in cultural landscapes. I have a BSc in archaeology from the University of York with honours, an MSc in architectural conservation from the University of Edinburgh, and a PhD in architectural history from the University of Edinburgh. Since completing my undergraduate degree in archaeology in 2001, I have worked as an archaeologist, a heritage planning assistant, a heritage consultant and an academic. I have been a teaching and research fellow in architectural history since 2009, holding positions at the University of Edinburgh, Glasgow School of Art and Napier University. I have recently been recruited by Historic Environment Scotland within their Heritage Directorate casework team, assessing the impact of development on heritage sites on the west coast of Scotland and in the Highlands.
Can I just stop you there and ask you, have you had any involvement with the Royal High School project, any of them, Scheme 1, Scheme 2, or the Music School project for HES?
No. As I say in my recognition, I have only focused on cases on the west coast and in the Highlands. I have had no dealings with anything to do with Edinburgh.
Thank you. Please read on.
In 2008, I was awarded a collaborative PhD scholarship from the Arts and Humanities Research Council and Edinburgh World Heritage to assess and produce a doctoral dissertation on the cultural significance of Colton Hill. This scholarship was carried out at the University of Edinburgh in partnership with Edinburgh World Heritage and the City of Edinburgh Council. The intention was that my research would provide an academic analysis of the history of Colton Hill, alongside its cultural and political significance, while also producing information that would feed into help with future decisions on the management of the site. While my doctoral research was submitted in early 2013, I have continued research into specific aspects of this site, notably the theory and resonance of the urban design of Colton Hill and the Third Newtown, and its broader significance within the understanding of the evolution of theories of the picturesque within the urban realm that evolved during the late 18th and early 19th centuries. This has resulted in the production of publications and exhibitions on the history of this site and those involved in its development, including a recently published book titled Colton Hill and the Third Newtown. The landscape of Colton Hill is specifically unique through both the development of its layout and its relationship with the City of Edinburgh and the nation of Scotland. Over the last 3 centuries, its topography, urban layout and architectural design has been a reflection of the aesthetic, scientific, cultural and political theories that have embodied Scottish identity on a varying scale from the late 18th century right through to the end of the 20th century. In particular, its unique urban design of 1819 is the culmination of the development of discourse surrounding picturesque theory and its application within the urban realm during the last few years of the 18th century and the early 19th century. This, coupled with the presence of Greek Revival architecture on this site during the early 19th century, demonstrated Scotland's understanding of its significance as a nation and its pivotal role in ensuring the successes of 19th century British imperial ambition. The presence of Thomas Hamilton's Royal High School within this site particularly highlights these key aspects of Scottish historical identity through its architectural output. As a neoclassical building of the urban picturesque, Hamilton's Royal High School is celebrated internationally for its design and setting. The skill of placement and scale of the Royal High School within the landscape of Calton Hill demonstrates Hamilton's understanding of Greek Revival and highlights contemporaneous discussions surrounding aesthetics and its application to landscape on this site that were largely pioneering for their time. So I'll just move on to...
Please read on until the end of section 3D.
Okay. In the 18th century, Calton Hill developed into a semi-rural periphery that was to be seen from the rest of the city, as well as a place to view the city from. The creation of this and the impact of its development on the later approach to the site is significant in fully understanding the significance of this site. The earliest development of note on the hill is considered within the Heritage Statement through a discussion of the development of the Gothic Observatory. However, there are errors in the attribution of the Gothic Observatory to Craig, and in Craig's role in developing the site in general. Craig's building was left incomplete. This is visible in Robert Barker's panorama of 1792, which was recorded from the summit of the Gothic structure. The Gothic structure was placed on the hill, arguably through the influence, if not design, of Robert Adam. Robert Barker's panorama of 1792, taken from the Gothic structure, linked the city with the surrounding countryside in a 360-degree view, connecting it with the wider landscape and demonstrating the link between and context of countryside and cityscape. As the first ever panorama, the view from Calton Hill became a national sensation when Barker took this panorama on tour around the country. This is not addressed within the Heritage Statement. The popularity of this panorama and its view is exploited in the design of the Nelson Monument as an outlook tower 15 years later. The Nelson Monument did not, as referred to in the Heritage Statement, take the literal form of an upturned telescope. This was not how the structure was described by the architect as the intended form. This monument took influence from an 18th century design for an outlook tower in Northumberland by Robert Adam. This is due to the huge influence that Robert Barker's 1792 panorama from Calton Hill had within popular culture, as well as the recognition of the summit as a good vantage point to view the old and new towns and their surrounding landscape.
Dr. Carter, can I ask you a question that arises from evidence? We've heard a lot about monumentality from a number of witnesses. And, of course, that might have a technical meaning. But from the point of view of a Georgian person, how would they understand monumentality and the monuments on Calton Hill?
Well, there's a few aspects to it. First of all, the educated Georgian would have a very strong understanding of classicism and the allegorical nature of classicism within contemporary society. But in particular, this idea of the monument within the urban realm, there is a very strong sense of monuments being used from this period onwards to actually try and inspire and I wouldn't want to say suppress, but to control the general populace. There was real threat from France with regards to revolution, and to have monuments within the landscape that celebrated state. There is a quote that says that these monuments were to make the general public be sublimed into domestic apathy.
Thank you. If you could read on from E, and perhaps if you could stop at the end of 4D.
Okay. The benefits of the view from the hill were still lauded at the time of William Stark's report of 1814, where he states that it were needless to state in what degree the Calton Hill is an object of public interest, considered as a leading feature in the general scenery of, or as striking and attractive spot affording a succession of the most splendid and diversified views that are to be found assembled in immediate vicinity of any large city and within the compass of a few minutes' walk. From the late 18th century, thanks in part to Barker's panorama, Calton Hill developed into a semi-rural periphery that was to be seen from the rest of the city, as well as a place to view the city from. Robert Adams' Bridewell was the first substantive development that integrated Calton Hill into the city. This development prompted numerous attempts by Adam to stylistically reconcile the relationship between Calton Hill and both the old and new towns, as can be seen in his sketches for bridges to Calton Hill. Both of these bridges link the city to the hill, approaching the hill from the west, as is evident from the titles within the plates 1 and 2, which I have supplied as part of my recognition. The bridge between Calton Hill and the new town, built in the 19th century, was to supply direct access to Archibald Elliott's new jail. This jail was to the west of the Bridewell, not the east, as it is referred to within the Heritage Statement. This bridge was to continue as a road around the south side of the hill, and Heriot's Hospital Trust, who were asked to provide a percentage of funding for its construction as the road. This commissioned Robert Stevenson to provide a report on how this road would aid access to and development of their lands on the eastern side of the hill. Stevenson's report confirmed that, as well as providing access to the new jail, this road would create a new access route into the city, provide a more direct and scenic route from Princes Street to the housing estate proposed to be built on Heriot's Hospital's lands, which are now Royal Regent and Carlton Terrace, and also provide access to Calton Hill from the west for the city's inhabitants. Reference to Stevenson's plans within the Heritage Statement places undue emphasis on the approach from the east. While Stevenson was well aware of the need to ensure that the road enhanced the landscape of the hill and of the extent to which it signalled an appropriate point of arrival into the new town, there is no discussion regarding the approach from the west, which is considered in just as much, if not more detail, by Stevenson in his report. The omission of Stevenson's discussion and approach to the site from the west, and the emphasis on this eastern approach by the appellants, gives a skewed focus on Stevenson's intentions for the layout of the road around the south side of Calton Hill.
So if I could just ask you, have you walked from Waterloo Place to and past the Royal High School recently?
Yes, I have. I did that last week.
And what's your experience of how you first see or don't see the Hamilton Building as you make that journey, or perambulation even?
There are glimpses of the Hamilton Building as you walk along from Waterloo Place. There are different aspects that are seen as you move along. Obviously, the Gate Lodge creates those different aspects with its existence at the western side of the Royal High School. But at certain points you can see the roofline, you can see the western flank of the building, you can see the rear of the building in different degrees.
If you could read on to the end, from D to the end of section 5, please.
Okay. Archibald Elliott's designs for Waterloo Place emphasise the importance of the approach along this route, which can still be recognised in the existing urban fabric, such as the twin triumphal screen arches, which are provided in plate 3, and the decorative niches for busts or urns set into the retaining walls of Old Calton Burial Ground down both sides of Waterloo Place. Archival imagery comparing Waterloo Place in Edinburgh with Waterloo Place in London particularly affirms the significance of Elliott's classical vista towards Calton Hill from the new town to the east. This view from Princes Street along Waterloo Place was designed to replicate the view from Carlton House in London, which was the Prince Regent's main residence. This classical vista created a ceremonial and triumphal approach from Edinburgh to Calton Hill, which was used during the visit of the Prince Regent, by then George IV, to the city in 1822. There is limited discussion within the Heritage Statement on the influence of William Stark's posthumously published report of 1814 to both the layout of the road around the south side of Calton Hill and the subsequent positioning and design of the Royal High School. Stark's direct influence on Calton Hill as a whole has been confirmed in a number of key texts published on the Calton Hill by a variety of academic scholars. The dismissal of Stark's report by the appellants is downplayed as never intended for publication and incoherent in some respects. This is subjective and misleading. It was published, and it is clearly evident from the style, content and language of Playfair's reports of April and December 1819 that the adopted layout for the third new town was heavily influenced by Stark's report. Within Stark's report, there is a conscious expression of movement in the language used throughout the text. He is not looking at a specific ground plan. Instead, he describes experiencing the landscape in a dynamic form while travelling through the site, discussing architectural and artistic principles in design. We can better understand the broader resonance of this language when comparing this section of Stark's text on the layout of the third new town to Uvedale Price discussing the landscape and the picturesque. On the other hand, there are not unfrequently, in a bending alignment of street, much beauty and perhaps the most striking effects. Public buildings break upon the eye at the most favourable points of view, showing at once a front and a flank. They are seen at a proper distance and under a proper angle. But if placed at the extremity, or even at the side of a long and straight line of street, they are decried too soon, and expectation and interest have subsided ere they have assumed the form and magnitude most calculated to please and to strike. And the second quote from Uvedale Price: intricacy of landscape might be defined that disposition of objects, which by partial and uncertain concealment excites and nourishes curiosity. Variety can hardly require a definition, as intricacy in the disposition and variety in the forms, the tints and the lights and shadows of objects are the great characteristics of the picturesque. It is clear that Stark is emphasising the ideas of the picturesque within an urban context through his discussion of the site. His approach to understanding landscapes considers the placement of structures that are not immediately revealed, but that are also complementary to and nuanced in the landscape within which they are placed. This provides a continued interest to the viewer in experiencing the urban realm that extends beyond the symmetry and regularity of an aligned street pattern. While the word picturesque is used by the appellants within the Heritage Statement, it is clear that there is a misunderstanding and misapplication of the term in general with regards to its relationship with the beautiful and the sublime, and within its appropriate context of 19th century discourse of the picturesque. This is particularly prevalent when applied to understanding the urban landscape of the third new town. This is considered with regard to the third new town in general terms within my PhD thesis, and is discussed with regards to the Royal High School in more specific terms in John Lowry's topic paper. Stark's report emphasises the site's unique qualities, configuration and existing planting, each a vendible commodity, not to be compromised by any artificially regulated plan, the niceties of square and rule, but rather to be sensitively exploited. His influence is clear in Playfair's reports of 1819, which takes great care to emphasise the need for the happy union of foliage and building, which by being kept subordinate will throw an additional charm over the surrounding scenery. Stevenson's 1814 report considers the benefit of contouring the hill to retain the characteristic views of the city, which are chief inducements to the new line of the road. Both Playfair and Stevenson understood the importance of responding to the natural context of the surrounding landscape and the importance of scale with regard to the development of the hill. Although Playfair took influence from Stark directly, Stevenson shared many of Stark's values, noting that the scale of the streets had to be kept wide enough to appreciate the broad views towards Calton Hill from Princes Street, while considering the positive impact that the rugged rocks on which Nelson's monument is erected would have on the view. While all three men considered how specific natural features in the landscape would enhance architectural design, each brought a specific element of consideration to the south side of Calton Hill. Stark discussed how the gradual reveal of buildings along bending streetscapes created a level of suspense and interest in the dynamic nature of the urban realm. Playfair emphasised how the subordinate nature of buildings to the hill within the design would create a complementary effect, and Stevenson's wide streets ensured the retention of key views while providing access to and from the site. It is Hamilton's response to the combination of all these aspects in the Royal High School, along with a broader cultural resonance of his Greek Revival design overall, which is addressed in section 6, which I'll get to, that allows us to fully appreciate and understand the significance of this site.
Now, Doctor, there's been evidence and questioning about whether the Hamilton building is in a picturesque landscape or not. And I suppose the question that the reporters might be looking for the answer is, why is that relevant now to our understanding of the building today?
Well, the answer is, in brief, that it is in a picturesque landscape. We have to understand, with regards to the picturesque, that what we are looking at by the time of Hamilton's design is a discussion surrounding the picturesque that is more about the understanding the value of the site overall rather than a specific view from the eye. And there's a specific quote that I could pull up from Repton that would define that in more detail. Where we talk about the sublime, what we're looking at is an understanding of a landscape that causes awe. I would describe something like standing in a glen in the Scottish Highlands and looking up at one of the huge mountains in the Scottish Highlands as a sublime landscape. And obviously you can add architecture to that in certain ways that creates a sublime feeling. But what we have here is something that is intended to intrigue, is intended to provide interest. And within a 19th century context, that is with moving through the site and keeping that intrigue and interest.
Thank you. If you could read on section 6 and section 7. At the end of 7D, I'll ask you, I think, my penultimate question.
It is acknowledged in the Heritage Statement that there are limitations in both the Calton Hill Conservation Plan and the Royal High School Conservation Plan, stating that although they provide a level of baseline information, there are shortcomings in their broader analysis. This was what was to be addressed in the series of essays included within the Heritage Statement. The limitations of the Calton Hill Conservation Plan are also highlighted in my 2014 thesis, where I note that in order to fully understand the site, there is a necessity for any work leading on from the conservation plan to consider wider concepts relating to the cultural, political and social discourse of the 19th century. This was in order to ensure a more accurate, in-depth and broader-ranging contextualisation of the site. While this limitation of scope is intended to be addressed within the subsequent essays included in the Heritage Statement, these documents are largely historically narrative in their approach. The Heritage Statement has therefore missed the more significant analytical discussion surrounding the resonance and nature of political and cultural dialogues that were key to the development of the Third New Town, Hamilton's Royal High School, and the resonance of the Greek Revival within a Scottish context. This has left large gaps in the nuance and understanding of the broader significance of this site, which has been further emphasised within Mr. Wright's inquiry report. In this, it is argued that the importance of the Greek Revival to Scottish national identity is overstated. Archival analysis within my PhD thesis proves that the use of the Greek Revival was key in defining Scottish identity through a cultural means, when Scotland had little political identity of its own. The majority of pupils attending the Royal High School would have access to school from the new town in the west. This was considered in contemporaneous discourse surrounding the placement of the Royal High School on Calton Hill, which is addressed within my PhD thesis. This discusses the societal class of boys who would be attending the Royal High School. Although the school professed to be egalitarian, it is clear that there was an onus on allowing greater ease of access to those living in the new town, as this demographic made up the majority of students enrolled at the Royal High School. It has been argued within the Heritage Statement that the Royal High School was designed to be viewed mainly on the approach from the east. A number of visual examples presented by the appellant are used as proof that Hamilton's intent and vision for the site as a public building within the cityscape was focused on the approach from the west of the site, stating that this confirms that a view from the west was never given the same weight or importance. This
actually might be a good point to ask you that question here. There have been some discussion about the attribution of a picture, and I think Mr. Wright was asked about it and dealt with in his rebuttal precondition. Now, why does it matter whether or not a picture is painted by Mr. Allam or was involved, or Mr. Hamilton was involved? Why do you think it's important for today?
Well, if we look at a discussion within the heritage statement, I'll just pull out the reference to that.
I think that would that be CD 197, which is the Heritage Scheme 2?
CD 197. On page 55 and 56. And there is, on page 55, there's a watercolour that it is noted is attributed to Hamilton. Now, attributed is a very key word. There is actually a number of drawings and paintings that were part of this bequest that were given to the National Galleries, and only 2 of them were attributed to Thomas Hamilton. The rest were done by Thomas Hamilton. This image in particular is very similar to another image which until recently was attributed to David Roberts and Thomas Hamilton. While carrying out research for my book, the attribution changed to Thomas Allam because information within the Royal Scottish Academy's minute books were found that actually say that Thomas Allam was the artist involved in that image.
Could I press you to move on to the other? Why it matters today? Why
it matters, I beg your pardon. There is many arguments within the Heritage Statement and within Professor Taverner's discussion that this is Hamilton's intention for the building to be viewed from this angle. Hamilton was not involved in to the extent which is being argued with Allam's painting. Allam is the artist of that, with some influence from Hamilton, but it wasn't not Hamilton that painted it. This one, there is a question mark. So my argument is that there is reasonable doubt as to using either of these images as an argument that Hamilton preferred this view, as opposed to it just being another view of his building.
Thank you. If you could read on, please.
The argument focuses on Hamilton's perspectives to prove that the view from the east was the dominant approach to the Royal High School. 3 perspectives attributed to Hamilton are used in the Heritage Statement. None of these depict the building from the same viewpoint. Reference to the location of Hamilton's Burns Monument in front of the Royal High School is emphasised within the argument of Hamilton's preferred view towards the Royal High School. This is incorrect. Firstly, Hamilton was not commissioned to build this monument until after the development of the Royal High School was largely complete. Secondly, he did not choose the site for the monument. This had been allocated as early as 1821.
Now, can I just stop you there? Were you around, I think it was for some of Professor Taverner's evidence on this topic?
I saw it on online.
Right. So one of your footnotes in a document you produced was referenced by the professor. Have you had an opportunity to think about what, if anything, this discussion about whether Burns Monument should be to the west of the Western Pavilion on Millers Now and then wasn't, tells you about what Hamilton thought of the building that he built?
I believe that Hamilton raised the possibility of placing the Burns Monument on Millers Now because it would continue to add to this intrigue. It would not block the view towards the Royal High School building, but would add an additional level of interest that would draw you round the corner and towards the full reveal that we see for Hamilton's building.
Just for clarity, because we often get confused about geography, what direction are you talking about here?
From the west.
Thank you. If you could read on, and I have no more questions, but if you could read to the end, please.
Later photographic perspectives from the east are also used as proof of the preferred approach to this public building. It is not addressed within this argument that due to the nature of the site, it would be much more difficult to take a static photograph of the majority of the facade from the west, as the road from this angle is not set far enough back to do this. The best point to gain the widest angle to photograph the majority of the facade is on the outcrop where the Burns Monument sits. The analysis of static viewpoints within the heritage statement does not take into consideration the nature of the building's design as a dynamic piece of architecture within an urban picturesque landscape, which is outlined previously in Section 5. The assessment of imagery for this site is somewhat linear, as it fails to consider the broader context of Hamilton's building within the cultural and political discourse of the early 19th century, and how this was represented in artistic form. This is particularly notable in the use of Thomas Allen's watercolour as argument for a preferred viewpoint. This ignores the resonance of the composition of the bright, white neoclassical structures contrasted to the darkened outline of the old town behind. This is part of a broader dialogue surrounding neoclassical architecture and its representation of enlightened, learned society in the 19th century. The composition and significance of a sister image and others of a similar nature are discussed within my PhD thesis. The relationship between Calton Hill and the city has been noteworthy from the late 18th century. From this date, there has been a continued consciousness of the juxtaposition between countryside and cityscape in defining this site. Efforts to create a significant entrance to Calton Hill from the west as part of a wider extension to the first new town were prevalent from the late 18th century. However, this was not realised until the 19th century through the work of Robert Stevenson, Archibald Elliott and then William Henry Playfair. Stevenson's laying out of the road on the south of Calton Hill discussed approaches from both the east and the west. However, it is clear that more focus was given to the approach from the west in execution. This is evident by the nature of the architectural realm laid out by Elliott from this direction and how this was depicted within contemporaneous imagery, as well as its use for key state ceremonial processions after its construction. Playfair's plan for this site was heavily influenced by William Stark's report. This advocated that the site's natural assets needed to be maintained when laying out the urban landscape and its structures, and that any structural development should be subordinate to the site. Stark emphasised the use of slowly revealing perspectives of buildings in order to produce a dynamic feel to the urban realm. These qualities define the picturesque as it was understood in the early 19th century. Hamilton's Royal High School design was subordinate in scale to the hill, and in keeping with Stark's ideas of how the urban picturesque could be achieved on this site through its placement on the bending alignment of the street. The Royal High School was mainly attended by students from the new town, who would have accessed the school from the western approach. The heritage statement is largely a narrative in its discourse and is at times misleading in its interpretation. It lacks broader nuance surrounding the cultural and political significance of this site. In particular, it understates the resonance of the layout of the third new town and the placement and design of Greek Revival structures in the 19th century. These have been proven to be a demonstrative display of Scottish cultural identity at a time when Scotland had little political voice. Analysis of primary sources within the heritage statement is often misleading, and its linear approach lacks the broader academic perspective and rigour needed to fully understand the complicated nature of this site. This has created a misconstrued understanding of this site in general, and the Royal High School building in particular. It misrepresents the role that the urban picturesque had in influencing Hamilton's approach to the Royal High School from the west. It also downplays the significance of his Greek Revival design within the dialogue of Scottish cultural identity in the 19th century.
Thank you, Dr. Cosby. I have no more questions.
Thank you, Mr. McIntosh. Mr. Steele, are you still confident of completing cross before lunch? Or?
Yes, sir. I'll finish by 1 o'clock.
Okay, let's do that. Thank you.
Dr. Matee, good afternoon to you. Could we go straight, please, to your theses at CD 620? Page 141.
Is it the actual page 141? Is there a number at the bottom of the...
I have 141 at the bottom of my page.
Okay. Yes. Yep.
Have you got that? And is it there that you tell us about Hamilton's intention for the Burns Monument and to locate it on top of Miller's Now?
Yes, I talk about its possible, I surmise there is a possible attempt to repeat the spatial relationship found between the Acropolis and the Lysikrates Monument, between that of the National Monument and the Burns Monument.
And as I understand it, one of the outcomes of your very extensive research is that you believe that that was his intention. Is that correct?
It's a surmisation, it's not. It's a guess, rather, or I believe that in as much as the research that I have done, yes.
So from the research you've done, you believe that to be the case?
At this point, yes. In 2013,
Yeah.
yes.
Can we look, please, at APP 45, being the inquiry report by Professor Taverner, just to slightly better understand this if we can. This is simply Dr. McKee for ease of reference.
I think I have one here, thank you, yeah.
And do we see there reproduction of the watercolour by Hamilton?
Sorry, Mr. Steele, which page are we looking at?
I'm so sorry, page 33 and 34. Do we see there at page 33 the reproduction of Hamilton's watercolour showing Miller's Now?
Yes.
And that's consistent with your understanding that his intention was to retain the Now there. That's the first stage of your outcome of your research.
I don't think I ever said that he wanted to retain the Now. I said he wanted to place it on Miller's Now, but there is no discussion about the retention or not. It could be that he wanted to place it there.
He may have what, sorry?
He may have wanted to place it there on that space, but there is no discussion about the retention or not of the Now.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you were suggesting that it was to be placed on top of the actual Now.
It may be, but there is no specific discussion about whether he would retain the Now or not.
So, the position then is this, is it, just correct me if I've got this wrong, that either he was going to place it in the location of the Now or on top of the actual Now itself, that is the Burns Monument?
Yes.
What approximately is the height of the current Burns Monument, do you know?
I don't, but I think if you look at my paper on the Burns Monument, I talk about how the current Burns Monument was designed in relation to its placement on the precipice that it was put on eventually.
Yeah. That's resembling the Temple of Vesta, I think, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
So we have in Tivoli.
Yes, so we cannot compare the scale and size of that monument to what Hamilton may have wanted to place on top of Miller's Now.
That may or may not be right, but what height approximately is the monument that is there at the moment, do you know?
I don't know, no.
It is of some significant size, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And can we deduce, therefore, that it is likely that Hamilton would have put a monument, the Burns Monument of some significant size, at this location had he been allowed to?
No. I disagree with that.
As a matter of fact, the reason he didn't do so was because of the, not the City of Edinburgh Council directly, but their forefathers, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And they told him it had to go elsewhere, which is why it is where it is now.
That's correct.
So just going back to the question of size, is it not fair to surmise that that monument, wherever it was going to be designed by Hamilton, would have been of some significant proportions?
No.
So you think it was going to be a very modest affair, do you?
I have no idea what Hamilton's intentions for that specific site would be with regards to scale. none of us do. But as far as I know, with regards to his intentions with design of other buildings within the city, he was always very conscious of the setting of his buildings, and his design always reflected that. So we can surmise to the extent that his building would have been complementary to wherever it was sited.
Could I take you, please, to document 622?
Could you specify, please, a bit more what that is?
It's the LDN Architects document CD 622.
Okay. Thank you.
And there is, if you can find page under the Joe Rock research, page number 13, an extract from the Scotsman at the bottom of the page. Have you got that?
Yes.
Now, that is a quote in these terms. That is a quote in these terms. Operations are now carrying out at Miller's Now a hillock, reducing the breadth and giving it a more picturesque form on a plan by Mr. Hamilton. It may be suited to a colossal statue at a later date. What do you say about that, Doctor?
If you were to turn to my paper on the Burns Monument, which I'll not do because I know you have I want to get through this, you will note that there is a number of discussions about the different types of statues, monuments, and what a commemoration to Burns would actually manifest. At one point there was discussion of colossal statues. At other points there was discussion of monuments. And although this paper reports a colossal statue, that was not what was intended by Hamilton.
In any event, Doctor, what you said earlier is that this would have, as I understand it, added intrigue and a level of interest to the full reveal. Is that so?
That's correct.
And that would be the full reveal or intrigue when one is coming west to east along Waterloo Place towards Regent Terrace.
That's correct.
And that is because the statue, colossal or not, would have attracted attention and drawn the eye. Is that so?
Yes.
And it would also be fair that at certain points, any part of Miller's Now and or the statue, again colossal or not, would have screened views to the western elevation and the main Hamilton building itself, depending on precisely where you were standing at.
If we look back to the image that you presented before in Mr. Taverner's report, you can see the scale and size of Miller's Now. If you were standing looking at a monument on top of that, you would see the building behind it to some degree. You would see one part, either the flank or the front, depending on where you were standing. I wouldn't imagine there would be any point that you would not be able to see some aspect of the building behind it.
I don't want to get too pedantic with you, Dr. McKee, but if you're standing hard up against it, you're going to see little else, aren't you?
No, because you just turn your head and you can see the building to the side. It depends on where. No, because you just turn your head and you'll be able to either see the side or you'll be able to see the front.
In any event, we'll let the reporters judge that. But in any event, Dr. McKee, the simple fact of the matter is this, that this would have been a point of intrigue and would have added to the level of interest, and that's what people would have looked at as they came along Waterloo Place, and that was his intention, wasn't it?
Yes.
And that was intention rather than having the primary focus on the western elevation of the building, isn't it?
No. That's not correct.
Thank you very much. No further questions.
Sir, two questions.
Yeah, carry on.
Mr. McKee, could you have before you APP-24, which is the Thomas Hamilton sketch enclosing walls, which appears to show Miller's Now?
Sorry, I missed that reference.
APP-24, sir.
Thank you.
Do you have that?
I do, yes.
Now, we can see on that drawing the western pavilion, but we can't see the western wing of the Hamilton building. I want to check that first.
On the drawing, APP 24, yes.
So you were asked a few questions about whether Miller's Now would have blocked views of the western wing of the Hamilton building. I appreciate it's not actually in this drawing, but we can see the boundary walls, the gates, and Carlton Hill Drive and the western pavilion. Is there anything you'd like to add to your explanation as to what impact Miller's Now would have had on visibility of the western wing?
Well, as you can see, Miller's Now is a very modest lump of rock. If Hamilton was to have developed a monument on top of it or instead of it, you would still have been able to see the main body of the high school building behind it.
Thank you. My other question relates to what might or might not have been in Hamilton's mind when he was thinking of building something, a Burns monument. You explained to Mr. Steele that the Burns monument, that where it is now, is built at the base of the Temple of Vesta.
Yes.
I think you mentioned it being part of, because of the precipice site. Are there any other monuments in Scotland that reference the same ancient monument that might have been, that are relevant to this discussion about size of what Hamilton had in mind?
With regards to Hamilton's monuments, he obviously developed the Burns Monument at Alloway, which is not a squat. It has an open. It is not enclosed. It is not of the same scale, although it is obviously has a degree of monumentality about the design. So, with regards to Hamilton's monument, that is a monument that I think reflects how Hamilton considered the nature of classicism and reflecting both the allegorical nature of commemorating Burns and the particular site within which it's situated. I think that there is also a reference to the David Hume monument within Hamilton's development of the Burns Monument on Calton Hill, which did at one point sit on a rocky precipice until the burial ground was extended, and there is that understanding of the nature of the site that Hamilton tries to express in relationship to how Adam understood the site when he developed the David Hume Monument.
Thank you. No more questions.
Thank you, Mr. McIntosh. Thank you, Dr. Carter-McKee.
Thank you.
We'll take a lunch break now until 2 o'clock.
Yes, sir. My next witness is Adam Wilkinson. I'm proposing that he read his precognition, and there are 2 questions I propose to ask him as we get to various places. Mr. Wilkinson.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I've been Director of Edinburgh World Heritage since 2008. A copy of my CV is attached to this precognition. EWH was set up by the City of Edinburgh Council and Historic Scotland in 1999, combining the Old Town Renewal Trust and the New Town Conservation Committee, with the express purpose of championing the old and new towns of Edinburgh World Heritage Site. EWH works in close partnership with CEC and HES in the management of the World Heritage Site via the World Heritage Site Steering Group. EWH is viewed internationally as an example of best practice in this field. EWH's 3 strategic objectives are to 1. Protect and support the outstanding universal value of the World Heritage Site. 2. Champion and promote understanding of the values of our historic city centre World Heritage Site. 3. Build capacity and resilience in the World Heritage Site, the city and wider. EWH's engagement in the planning system is via a protocol agreed with CEC and HES. The protocol seeks EWH's early engagement to help identify if and how proposals might impact on OUV, and then to offer formal advice to CEC's planning committee on proposals at application stage. There is dialogue with CEC planning officials throughout, and key considerations are shared with HES. EWH's engagement with the appellants. I have set out EWH's engagement with the evolution of the appellant's proposals prior to publishing of Scheme 1 in a topic paper. The process by which DHP was selected as CEC's preferred development partner for the site is irrelevant to the appeal and the planning assessment of Scheme 1 and Scheme 2. The evolution from Scheme 1 to Scheme 2. The primary focus of this recognition is Scheme 2, on the grounds that the appellants have claimed it addresses the reasons that Scheme 1 was refused permission. The appellants maintain that Scheme 2 is at a substantially reduced scale when compared to Scheme 1. The appellants also maintain that the interventions have been reduced in the revised proposals to the minimum necessary to enable the hotel to function, and it must therefore be that Scheme 1 has a greater impact on the setting of the listed buildings and the OUV of the WHS than Scheme 2. If, as we say, Scheme 2 has a significant detrimental effect on OUV, the conservation area, and the listed buildings, the same will be true for Scheme 1. Chapter 1. The special interest and relative importance of the listed building and its contribution to the wider setting, including the conservation area, World Heritage Site, design, landscape, and other heritage receptors. The Royal High School is the noblest monument of the Greek Revival and perhaps the single building that most justifies Edinburgh's epithet as the Athens of the North. It is a building of international importance and is one of the named buildings in the 1995 advisory body evaluation. The appellants play down the international importance of the Royal High School and fail to give proper appreciation of the importance of the setting of the building on Colton Hill within the World Heritage Site. This narrow view also isolates the Greek Revival from the picturesque and classical romantic movements. It is particularly concerning when, in assessing the impact on receptors, the appellant's heritage consultant minimises the importance of the Royal High School to the conservation area, Newtown Gardens inventory and World Heritage Site. I have set out the international context of the Royal High School and how setting is so important to understanding a Greek Revival building like the Royal High School in a topic paper. The appellant's argument that the intermittent use of the Royal High School has lessened its significance should be dismissed. Firstly, it is not possible for this to be the case in terms of its statutory protection, which covers its architectural and historical significance. Secondly, the building's wider significance is well established, if not fully considered by the appellants. Defining the setting of the Royal High School. As discussed in the topic paper, the question of setting is critical to Greek Revival buildings. The appellants do not give adequate weight to the importance of the setting of the Royal High School building in their discussion of the building's significance. This is reflected in the conservation principles, the conclusions of the heritage statement, and in the design, massing, and positioning of the proposed new buildings. The nearest they come to this is to mention the idea of sculptural isolation and the importance of the setting of neighbouring buildings and structures, although there is no specific reference to the setting of the RHS. The appellant's reverence for the building's architecture, separate to its setting, means that they treat the building as a museological object rather than part of a wider landscape, a jewel to be placed in a display box rather than worn by the landscape. The RHS was purposefully sited on Colton Hill, and it forms part of the collection of buildings and monuments on the hill, which must be considered Edinburgh's Acropolis. The Royal High School is the propylaeum to Colton Hill, with the angle pavilions that presage the discovery of the Temple of Athena Nike in 1834, while directly drawing from the Temple of Odysseus. The immediate setting of the building takes in its playgrounds, the Regent Road, and the space on the hill behind the building and playgrounds. The character of the wider setting is one of landscape interspersed with classical buildings, many of which are Greek Revival in nature. It is fundamentally a temple in a landscape, not a building in a townscape. This symbolism is expanded upon in the evidence of Dr. McKee. It is best appreciated in long views. While the appellant's supporting documents do at one point acknowledge the picturesque qualities of the site of the RHS on Colton Hill, they do not consider their proposals in the context of the site. More normally they refer to Hamilton's composition of building elements as picturesque. The Heritage Statement and its Heritage Impact Assessment measure the current state of the building and its setting against an idealised point in time, seemingly shortly after construction of the Royal High School, when the backdrop to Hamilton's composition was fresh-cut rock. All changes since are considered detrimental. This is evident with the description of the process of a building ageing as sitting uncomfortably with classical perfection. However, there is a lack of analysis within the Heritage Statement of what constitutes the setting of the Royal High School. There is also no focused analysis of the cumulative impact of the buildings currently within the immediate setting of the Royal High School. The 4 non-Hamilton buildings on the site are clearly separated and subordinated to the Hamilton building. This stance is, in World Heritage terms, irrelevant. Firstly, we have to judge a building or site as it was at the point of inscription, when the value of the asset is identified, rather than an idealised moment. Secondly, international charters and documents guide us to consider the evolution of cultural values. This has led to a lack of perspective, and to the conclusion that the setting of the Royal High School has been so badly damaged by invasive vegetation and additions since 1830 that the proposed extensions are justified in not recognising the hierarchy within the site. There are other instances of this lack of perspective, including pejorative comments about Colton Jail and Wyatt's Gothic architecture. Andrew Wright appears to argue that there is a continuous line of development around the hill. That is not the case, and the supporting documents later discuss the importance of the green space or chasm between St Andrew's House and the building. Perhaps confusion has crept in when interpreting the nomination document statement that the 4th Newtown's principal characteristic is linear development from the majestic processional entrance from Waterloo Place and the Royal High School round the hill. In the context of the discussion of setting, the appellants give too much weight to the significance of the retaining wall at the back of the site, and hence also to the conservation benefits of opening views to the rear of the Royal High School, including the wall. The relative importance of the rear is clear from the lower quality of stonework deployed by Hamilton and the simplification of the entablature. The rear is the least significant part of the composition, as is common in Greek Revival buildings, such as the Outers Museum, the Glyptothek or the British Museum. The retaining wall was necessary to create the site rather than being integral to the design of the Royal High School. It is not immediately evident in front-on views of the building from the street or from more distant views. It is obscured by the angle of approach from Waterloo Place. It doesn't appear in Hamilton's RSA diploma drawing or his other drawings. It appears only in 2 images in the appellant's supporting documents, which are George Washington Wilson around 1890 and Kemp from around 1845. This argument is used to justify the loss of the gatehouse, which plays the role of a classical romantic tempietto in a rural setting. The main interruption to views to the rear is a single-storey austerity block. The gatehouse itself is easily restored.
Can I just stop you there and ask a question?
Please.
We've heard a lot of material about the nature of the Greek Revival and setting. Just focusing on what's relevant to the reporters and the ministers, what's about Greek Revival buildings that you really have to consider when considering the space around them?
Yes, absolutely. This starts when you look at how the sources are viewed, but starting perhaps with the Temple of Hephaestus below the Acropolis, which is a ruin essentially in a contrived rural setting. And these Greek Revival buildings are very often with some kind of rural element around them, even in the most urban situations, such as the Second Bank of America in Pennsylvania from 1817, where it's essentially in a contrived park, a designed landscape. And likewise, next door with the Greek Revival Regent Terrace, the importance of which shouldn't be underestimated. That itself sits in a rural setting, trying to imitate this with the trees in front and the designed landscape cemetery below. You also see this at the Walhalla, von Klenz's building in Bavaria, and at various other sites as well. So this symbolism takes us directly back to Athens, and it's a statement about the direct line from the beginnings of Western culture through to the intentions of that building. And you also see this in some other places as well. You see it occasionally in country houses, and certain reference come around that with this building as well, with its dependencies in the form of the temples to the side.
Thank you. If you could read Chapter 2, and I have a question for you at the end of it.
Of course. Scheme 2 includes 2 large wings on either side of the main Hamilton building and a spine corridor along the back of the building. The approach appears to be influenced by that of Foster and Partners for the Dolder Grand Hotel in Switzerland, images of which were used in early concept presentation by the appellants. This approach may have been deemed appropriate for a late 19th century grand hotel, but as argued above, with the Royal High School site and wider environment, is far more sensitive to change and development. The effect is to effectively isolate the original building from its setting. The proposals include wings that are higher than the Hamilton building and fill the green space between the Hamilton building and its neighbours. The appellants maintain that differentiation in design of new build means that new wings would not dominate the Hamilton building. Yet the new building sits in the setting. It is impossible for it not to be affected. They also describe the high parts of the wings as remote from the core of Hamilton's building. This is subjective. They are in the setting of the Royal High School and higher than it. The World Heritage Site nomination document identifies the linear development along the contour of Colton Hill as of importance and considers it to rival St Petersburg and surpassing Nash's Regent Park terraces in London. The appellants have proposed interventions of a completely different architectural language and massing strategy, presumably to maximise window space for views from rooms, negatively impacting the coherence of the linear development. The proposed cladding of the new wings is dark brown metal and glass. These are meant to be recessive, but instead will stand out, creating dark masses against the hill, and in contrast to the shades of cream to light grey of Edinburgh's Craigleith stone and the surrounding greenery. The appellants use A&DS's advice to justify the damage to the setting of the building. However, it does not mention that A&DS's advice is caveated on passing the statutory tests. The appellants also question the unity of view of the Edinburgh Urban Design Panel. It should be noted that all EUDP advice letters are passed by all present before sending and represent a corporate view.
Thank you, Mr Wilkinson. You've been involved, according to our topic paper, for some years consulting with the appellants. Do you have any observations about when consideration of conservation issues should start in a project?
In a project, whether it's one that EWH supports financially through its grant scheme or indeed any other conservation project, this should happen at the very start. The first look at the site should seek to understand the significance of the buildings, the significance of the elements of the buildings, and base that on a solid understanding, then give some indication of the order of significance. Once that is settled, then policies around if, where and how interventions might take place would be made. And those policies would be agreed with stakeholders before then moving forward to thinking about what is actually appropriate for that site and what can be achieved on that site.
If you could read on, please.
A critique of the HIA. Any assessment of the impact of Scheme 1 and 2 has to recognise the flaws of the appellant's approach, and in particular the weakness of the heritage assessment and the HIA that, in the appellant's eyes, justifies both schemes. Neither Scheme 1 nor Scheme 2 are conservation-led. The conservation strategy adopted for the site is a post hoc justification. The appellants have not shaped the proposed architectural intervention around a clear set of policies and understanding of the site. As described in the topic paper EW31, the appellant's initial proposals involved 2 flanking buildings and a 159-bed hotel well before the heritage assessment was instructed in 2014. The established methodology for a conservation-led scheme should be to assess the relative significance of the different parts of the building, its setting, and understand their capacity for change. This is then used to inform the brief. The methodology is well established and reflected in guidance across the UK and Europe. It is not referenced in the conservation principles. However, Andrew Wright repeatedly states the design is informed by and justified by the hotel brief. As a result, the HIA is being used to justify a design that had already been arrived at, rather than as a starting point for design, making it a somewhat futile exercise. However, Andrew Wright appears to recognise this as he indirectly notes that the hotel brief demands he overrides good conservation practice, particularly in relation to the setting of the Hamilton building. He notes that at the west, the bedroom wing might be considered to be optimally 1 story lower. The established methodology would have identified the setting of the building as part of the composition most vulnerable to change, and its critical importance to the symbolism of the building. Nowhere do the appellants acknowledge that their proposals constitute a large change in a sensitive location, deeply damaging the setting of the Royal High School. The failure to take account of setting within the HIA fundamentally changes its outcome. This leads to critical flaws in the arguments in favour of the development, and we cannot support the statement in respect of the Hamilton Building Scheme 1 and Scheme 2 maintains its prominence in all key views. On the 7th of July 2017, EWH wrote to CEC making a specific critique of the conservation principles. We stand by those criticisms and hold that they address concerns previously laid out by Mr Mappin in his letter of the 28th of October 2015. I have carried out a review of the HIA for the EWH board. That paper is provided as a topic paper and can be read by the reporters. I would draw out the following particular criticisms as they refer to impacts on the listed building itself, on the setting of other listed buildings, on the conservation area, on the World Heritage Site, on design, landscape and other heritage receptors. Key concerns from the paper include the appellant's weighting of the value of the views, the appellant's judgment of the impact of the proposal. In part, this is a result of not following the recommended procedure of producing a scoping report before the HIA assessment is made. The weight given by the appellant to views from the west, the weight given by the appellant to the Royal High School and its setting, the World Heritage Site, the Colton Hill Ensemble and the Royal High School and its setting merit a very high grading. The appellant's assessment of impact on the setting of the school. Changes to setting are comprehensive and so constitute major change as per ICOMOS guidance, in contrast to the appellant's negligible or minor. That is, to quote the ICOMOS guidance, slight change that hardly affects the building or setting or noticeable change. Taking these points into account, it is impossible to agree with the appellant's assertion that the development is unquestionably beneficial to the World Heritage Site. EWH assessment of the impact of both schemes. As a consultee, EWH has provided detailed responses to CEC and the DPA in respect of Scheme 1 and Scheme 2. EWH stands by its objections. Our fundamental premise is that the proposed new buildings on the site will damage the outstanding universal value of the World Heritage Site, the character of the Newtown Conservation Area, and the setting of the listed buildings in terms of A. the Royal High School and its setting in the open space playgrounds on either side, B. certain views into and out of the World Heritage Site, C. the grouping of buildings on Colton Hill, and D. other set-piece buildings that display elements of outstanding universal value, including, but not limited to, Regent Terrace and Holyrood Palace. Assessment of the consented RHSPT scheme, but restricted to the question of whether there are other options which would constitute a continuing beneficial use for the building, with less impact on its special interest. EWH supports the consented scheme proposed by the RHSPT. During the early stages of the scheme's development, we were approached by its team for advice on how to minimise negative impacts on OUV. Similar advice to that given to the appellants was provided, and it is evident that this advice was taken on board. The RHSPT ensures that approaching from the west, the notion of rus in urbe is retained by keeping the western playground free of development, demonstrating a clear understanding of the integration of townscape and landscape. It is arguable that the removal of the austerity block from the rear of the site enhances this. In views from the south, the RHSPT scheme works to reduce the overall impact of the buildings on the setting of the Royal High School by keeping development as low as possible. In terms of the overall impact of these proposals on the outstanding universal value of the World Heritage Site, our view is that, on balance, they would have a positive impact. They assure a beneficial use for the Royal High School in line with its original purpose. They have a positive impact on the setting of the Hamilton building, improving the western playground and lowering the level of development on the eastern playground. They service to support the overall position of the Royal High School in relation to the Colton Hill Ensemble by enhancing its landscape setting, giving absolute primacy to Hamilton's building and maintaining the unbroken line of classical buildings around Colton Hill. The existence of an alternative permitted scheme negates comments in the appellant's HIA regarding to mothballing. Chapter 5. Examination of relevant policy and guidance. Scottish planning policy states, para 147, that World Heritage sites are of international importance. Where a development proposal has the potential to affect a World Heritage site or its setting, the planning authority must protect and preserve its outstanding universal value. In Edinburgh, this is given effect through LDP Plan Policy ENV1. As set out in its letters of advice to CEC, EWH remains of the view that the local planning policy is correctly designed in order to provide effective protection for the outstanding universal value of the World Heritage Site and has been properly applied in respect of both schemes. LDP Policy ENV1 sets a clear framework which is wholly in line with the operational guidelines. These are the UNESCO guidelines for World Heritage Sites. Paragraph 96 is highly pertinent to this discussion, stating, protection and management of World Heritage properties should ensure that their outstanding universal value, including the conditions of integrity and or authenticity at the time of inscription, are sustained or enhanced over time. Judgments about OUV must be made from the point of inscription. This provides a clear baseline for management and avoiding argument about an idealised and alternately fictional moment in time. This is wholly ignored in the appellant's supporting documents. Whilst ENV1 is the primary tool by which the outstanding universal value of the World Heritage Site is protected, regard has to be had to the need to protect the character and amenity of the conservation area and the listed buildings. The Newtown Conservation Area Character Appraisal notes that the majority of the area is within the World Heritage Site and furthermore emphasises the importance of its protection, conservation and restoration, as well as the controlled development and harmonious adaptation to modern life. The character appraisal is aligned with and expands on the different aspects of outstanding universal value, providing much greater detail. It describes the overall approach taken by Playfair and Stark in the context of the earlier prescriptions for no buildings over 14 metres high in the new town, which the Royal High School and Regent Terrace broadly work within. The conservation area appraisal is clear that new development should work with the context of an area, respecting its massing, having regard to adjoining architectural styles, and should not have a visually disruptive impact on the existing townscape. Legislation, policy and guidance make clear that the economic drivers for change are secondary to conservation and enhancement of character and appearance of conservation areas. It should be recognised that there are economic drivers for conservation. EWH's 2012-16 study of the economic value of the World Heritage Site demonstrated a net present value for the World Heritage Site of between 1.2 and 1.4 billion, and a very high cost-benefit ratio of conservation projects based in the World Heritage Site of 12.75. This value makes sense when considering the price paid for the rights to use the Louvre Museum's branding, expertise and collections in Abu Dhabi, which is around 800 million, and the cost-benefit ratio makes sense given that the city's remarkable heritage is the reason people visit. A failure of the local system of protection. It is a duty of the state party under the World Heritage Convention, to which the UK is a signatory, to protect the values that lead to World Heritage inscription. The UK as a whole has chosen to use existing systems of protection in the planning system to ensure the protection of outstanding universal value. The protection of heritage within the planning system is the responsibility of Scottish Government. The primary tools in this are listed building and conservation area legislation, supported by national and local plan policies. The World Heritage Committee has recently shown a willingness to move sites it judges to have failed to adequately protect OUV to the World Heritage in Danger list. This is the first step to having the inscription removed. Liverpool was placed on the list for the proposals for the commercial development of its docks by Peel Holdings, without a single building in their plan being constructed. Liverpool has worked very hard to be removed from the in danger list, but the reputational damage to the city has been substantial. The appellants attempt to address concerns around the cumulative effect of recent applications in the World Heritage Site. This is mistaken in thinking that concerns are around cumulative visual impact. Instead, concerns are that a series of decisions are in danger of being taken that cumulatively demonstrate that the local system of protection is not functioning to prevent negative impacts on outstanding universal value. ICOMOS UK's assessment of this threat to outstanding universal value posed by both schemes is clearly stated in their objection letters. For Scottish ministers to give consent to either scheme would constitute a failure of the UK system of protection and turn the attention of the committee to Edinburgh, with a very, very real possibility of a motion to add Edinburgh to the endangered list, with consequences for the international reputation of Scotland and Edinburgh.
Thank you, Mr Wilkinson. I've got no more questions, sir.
Thank you, Mr McIntosh. Mr Steele.
Thank you, sir. Mr Wilkinson, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Firstly, are you a member of any professional organisation which has rules about conduct, such as the RTPI or the RIAS?
I am not a member of any professional organisation at present.
Do I understand that your main degree is in Russian and history?
It's in medieval history and Russian language, with a particular focus on the architectural history of the early medieval period.
You are, however, a director of the Edinburgh World Heritage Trust, is that so?
I'm not a director as in the board, but I'm the director as in the chief executive.
Well, you are the director as in chief executive, is that so?
That's correct.
Yeah. And that's precisely what you say at page 1. I have been the director of EWH. That's why I asked you about it, Mr Wilkinson. Now, would you accept that that is a responsible position and carries with it certain responsibilities, such as not to exaggerate or mislead, not to overstate or understate, and to be fair and honest in representations? Would that be fair?
That's fair, and it's a privilege to be in this position.
Can we look, please, at document 201, CD 201?
Yes.
And page 1, under the heading of the executive summary, do you see at the bottom of the page a quote attributed to you at the time of the hearing of the first application?
Yes.
Would you like to read that out, please?
The last time I looked around the building in detail was probably about 12 months ago.
And to put the matter in context for those who don't have the document in front of them, that's the main Hamilton building, is that correct?
That is correct. There had been some fall of lath and plaster from the ceiling as a result of a leak. Now, once you stop the water coming in, you've stopped the rot. You tidy that up, it dries out, and you put it back. It's quite straightforward. I've done it in my own home.
And that was your response to a question put at the committee meeting as to the condition of the existing fabric of the Hamilton building, was it not?
That's correct.
Do you think that was a fair and accurate response, Mr Wilkinson? Do you think that adequately reflects the nature of the issues that face that building, that you would be able to go in there and do a little bit of tidying up and it would all be fine?
I think what I said there was fair and accurate. To give you some context, I started my career as a carpenter, working on the restoration.
That, Mr Wilkinson. So does that mean all the more reason you should understand perfectly well the nature of the issues?
It means I understand the nature of rot and how to handle rot outbreaks in historic buildings, and have done so myself.
Yes. Does that also mean that you understand that until you start stripping it out, you don't know the full extent of rot?
You strip back, but first of all, you stop the water coming in. You stop the source, which is feeding the rot.
Yes, I understand that perfectly well, Mr Wilkinson, but the truth of the matter is this: one will not know the full extent of rot until one starts removing fabric. Is that not fair?
That's the tidying up. You tidy it up, it dries out, then you remove. You preferably set fire to, you treat the timber as well, and then you replace.
Do you really think, in the context of the question that you were being asked, Mr Wilkinson, that was a fair, adequate and appropriate response?
Absolutely. There's one element where there's been an outbreak of rot. The condition of the rest of the building was not poor. It's probably fair at that time. The stonework was in excellent condition given its age, and the rest of the building, although unheated since probably for a few months at that point, was still in pretty good condition.
Have you looked at all the fabric repair reports that have been prepared for this building?
Yes, I have seen those.
And do you understand that they total work in excess of several £1 million?
I understand that to restore it to a high level for reuse will cost several £1 million.
So, I repeat my question, Mr Wilkinson. Do you really think that's an adequate response to that question?
In the context of the question asked about the existing fabric condition, I think that is correct. It was to point out that this is not in very poor condition.
Let's turn to another topic, Mr Wilkinson, and that is the meeting in March in Toll Cross.
Yes.
And to cut to the chase, was it you that prepared the montages that were subject of questions this morning?
I prepared a montage which was subject to questions this morning, which was done for illustrative purposes. On reflection, I should have used a different image, and I apologise for having used that image. It was an honest mistake.
Well, I note the apology, Mr Wilkinson, but firstly, may we agree that the image that was used was misleading?
The image used was inaccurate.
Could you explain how you came to have that image, Mr Wilkinson? How you prepared it?
It involved Photoshop.
Is that the same as photobombing of the type that we heard about earlier?
Perhaps a little different.
The truth of the matter is this, that you took a photograph and photoshopped onto it the schemes as you understood them. Is that correct?
That is correct for illustrative purposes.
And at that time you had available to you the accurate montages because you had access to the actual application, didn't you?
That's correct. At the time, I had looked through them. I had not looked through them thoroughly enough to find one that illustrated what I wanted to illustrate. However, looking back, there is the possibility there are other images which could have been used.
There are images, Mr. Wilkinson, and surely you know that from that precise viewpoint.
Looking back now, I see that, yes.
Yes. And can we agree this, Mr. Wilkinson, that the image that you prepared in the way that you did was significantly different to the accurate montage that was available to you?
There were differences within the image. It was not entirely accurate.
Mr. Wilkinson, let us try and be fair. Let us neither exaggerate nor mislead. Let us try not to overstate nor understate.
Yes.
Can we agree, without further ado, that the montage that you prepared is significantly different from the truth of the matter?
As I have said, it was inaccurate. It was for illustrative purposes. On reflection, I shouldn't have used it, and it was an honest mistake.
Did you ever indicate to anyone afterwards that you'd done it deliberately, Mr. Wilkinson?
No.
Are you quite sure about that?
I'm quite sure about that.
Do you accept that this may well have had the effect of influencing public opinion as to what our proposal actually was, by virtue of the fact that a respected director of a very respected organisation put forward a montage which in truth was wrong and misleading?
I think it highly unlikely that it influenced people greatly, given the number of images shown on the evening, given the numbers present, and also given the number of other images which may have appeared in the press from both sides, or mostly, so which appeared in the press from the development side.
And did the speaker following you rely on this image as well?
I don't recall anybody else showing that image.
No, it was your image, but did the speaker after you rely upon it as well?
I do not recall that.
You're quite sure about that? You're quite sure about that, Mr.
I can be sure about not recalling it, yes.
And in your presentation, I'll come back to that point just in a moment, in your presentation, were you entirely critical of the proposals, firstly?
I had made a preliminary assessment of the proposals, and I illustrated what the key points of concern were.
And as an example, did one of your images say, would you be allowed to do this to your own home?
Yes, it did.
Yeah. And what on earth had that got to do with the matter, Mr. Wilkinson?
It was illustrating that the proposals, if you happen to own a listed building, you would not be allowed to do something of that scale to your own property.
And separately, were you hostile to the idea of having this building used as an hotel?
Not that I recall. We have been open to the idea of a hotel since it was first floated in 2009, I think, and at the time issued a press release saying that we welcomed the opportunity to explore this and understand what could be done with the building.
And in your presentation to the assembled company, which was a fairly significant volume of people, did you mention one single factor that was in favour of our proposal, such as the reuse of the building?
I don't recall.
Well, would you pause to think about it just for a moment, Mr. Wilkinson? Did you mention one single factor in favour of our proposal, or was it all hostile?
This was for the second scheme, so I would have not mentioned a factor there which I considered to be positive, as there was at that time either developing or permitted, I can't remember exactly, an alternative scheme which in terms of outstanding universal value would, in our judgment, be of less harm.
Because you also were supportive of the trust scheme in your presentation as well, weren't you?
I noted that there is an alternative scheme which was either permitted or was in for decision at that time, and which we felt had less impact, in fact had positive impact on the World Heritage Site.
And you made it perfectly clear that you were supporting that proposal as you thought in competition to ours.
In terms of outstanding universal value and impact, yes. I'd refer that in the context of our role, which is to champion outstanding universal value and to protect it as best we can as an organisation.
Taking you back to the presentation, was the speaker after you, Mr. Alistair Disley, if I pronounce the name correctly, of the Architectural Heritage Society for Scotland?
I believe it was Dr. Disley, yes.
And did he rely, possibly or almost certainly unwittingly, on your montage in his presentation? Do you recollect that?
I absolutely don't recall.
So could I cut in for a moment?
Yes.
It's entirely a matter for you, but whilst I've always anticipated that some of these questions would be asked, I am wondering how relevant they're getting after this amount of time. And so I'm just putting down a marker at this stage about whether they're becoming perhaps a little less relevant from the matters that Mr. Steele initially raised and which I anticipated he would raise.
Right, thank you. We'll note that.
I wonder, sir, if I could maybe have a brief 5-minute adjournment to ask some questions of somebody who I know was there on behalf of the HSS. The people sitting beside me at the moment weren't and don't know the answer to the question I need answered.
Do you have a view on that, Mr. McIntosh? Is that something that concerns you? I appreciate it's your witness.
My view is that we've got to a point where Mr. Steele has no doubt made the point he wished to make. He's put the issue he wanted to put. And if Mr. Wilkinson doesn't appear to recall things, there seems little advantage in going on into a meeting about which there's been no other evidence. So if, of course, there's something that the HSS know that I don't know, I was there, but I haven't any recollection of this either, so I can't really assist, then it would be appropriate to have a break, but it's a matter for you. I've got no difficulty breaking his evidence if that would help.
Thank you. Mr. Steele, do you want to respond to that?
I think if my friend wishes a moment to consult with her clients about this matter, I think I would encourage that to be done, to be honest. I've only just been passed a note that it was somebody from the HSS, which I didn't know. Otherwise, I'd have mentioned it earlier. But Ms Coburn, in my submission, is entitled to check this.
Is this something that you're taking a bit further after? Is that your intention, to take it a bit further in cross-examination?
I may very well do, depending on what happens, sir.
Okay, well...
But to be clear, Mr Wilkinson is, in my submission, not off the hook yet about this matter, because it's a very significant and serious matter for the Director of EWH to have done this, sir.
Well, let's...
Sir, I don't need a break, actually. I've got the answer I need. They've obviously understood my telepathy and my waving of hands.
You've been given the information you thought you needed a break for. Okay. Right.
I don't know, and obviously most of the folk here, I think bar one, don't know the answer to this, but I am assured that the presentation produced by Dr. Disley contains only images from the appellant. And I think from reference or from memory of an email that he sent to me some time ago in response to Mr. Wright's allegation, Dr. Disley took care to ensure that he used only images from the appellants and that were publicly available. So he didn't use any of Mr. Wilkinson's material, but I'm unclear as to the extent to which he might orally have referenced it. We don't know.
I do wonder whether it might be beneficial to have the few minutes now. I can have a discussion with Ms Coburn. I don't want to give evidence about this. I know the answers to these now.
Agree with that. Yeah, okay, let's break now until... well, let's break till 3. Thank you.
Sir, the rules of evidence, just general principles of fairness and professional courtesy, mean that we are all supposed to give each other fair notice of the case that is to be led. And to the best of the AHSS's abilities, they have done exactly that. There has been one late document, and I have already explained why that document was late, because it related or it depended upon information that was to be provided to me by Mr. Steele, and it was lodged as soon as that information was provided to me. It is therefore extremely disappointing that a chartered planner and a member of the RTPI, Jim Sorrell, sitting beside Mr. Steele, has, as I now understand it, only now passed a note to Mr. Steele stating that he has notes of the meeting and something about what Dr. Disley may or may not have said at that meeting following the presentation by Mr. Wilkinson. I have had no knowledge, there is no foundation whatsoever in any of the material produced by the appellants. The criticism made of the AHSS relates only to paragraph 6.11 of Mr. Wright's topic paper, which is restricted to Scheme 1. To be clear, sir, the visual produced by Mr. Wilkinson is of Scheme 2. So to be clear again, the criticism of which we had notice arises from a single paragraph in one of the 9 witnesses' topic papers.
Sorry, whose criticism?
Mr. Wright's criticism.
Okay.
And it is deeply unfortunate, sir, that when I asked Mr. Wright about the genesis of his criticism, I was given 2 answers, neither of which apparently seem to be true. It now seems to relate to visualisations produced by another party in respect of another team. And now, in cross-examination, once my witnesses have given evidence, a member of the RTPI, an experienced planner who knows the rules of evidence and who knows how inquiries work, has only apparently just now decided to inform his senior counsel that he was present at the meeting and that Dr. Disley may have said something which relied upon these visualisations produced by Mr. Wilkinson. There's no knowledge, there's no foundation, there's no fair notice. In fact, there's no notice at all. And I suggest, sir, that this line of questioning is stopped, and immediately.
I don't want to... I haven't written it down. I can't even remember what you just said about who it was. I don't think that matters to us now. It's what's being presented or being asked by Mr. Steele. Do you want to respond to that?
Mr. Steele does. Perhaps if I could inject, I think he should respond to both of us. It would probably be more efficient in terms of time.
Thank you.
I'm very clear that Mr. Steele has been very fair to me over the last year and a half to make it clear that he would conduct this cross-examination to the extent that we've just seen, and Mr. Wilkinson has known that. It's a matter for you to take an assessment on whether or what weight to give to it later, and no doubt I'll address it in submissions. But despite the fact that I have had that notice, and despite the fact that Mr. Sorrell has been the planning consultant since 2014 on this project, the information seems not to have got across. And to now put to my witness something for which there is no notice, for which I have no recollection of, seems not only to be unfair, but also, I would suggest, it's now become irrelevant. And I would suggest that the purpose for which Mr. Steele has asked the questions he's asked has now been dealt with, and that we should move on. So I'd object to the idea that somehow more information be introduced about a public meeting years after the event, when there's been lots of opportunities to provide information, and they've all not been taken.
Mr. Steele, your
Sir,
response, please.
Can I just, so far as AHS are concerned, can I try to diffuse what may be a misunderstanding? The only questions I'm asking about at the moment relate to a meeting at Toll Cross. The only criticism that we make in relation to the meeting at Toll Cross is directed at Mr. Wilkinson, who is in the witness chair at the moment. The fact that another individual has unwittingly and innocently referred to and relied upon the false images is not the fault of that individual, who I now realise is called a Mr. Disley, who I now realise is from the AHSS. That's all, Dr. Bisley, I'm sorry, sir. That's by the by. The fact of the matter is this, that the image, or images, and I'm not quite clear which yet, but we'll get on to that, have been falsified by the director of Edinburgh World Heritage, and to a significant extent. And that's the issue, sir. It is material because it almost certainly has affected public opinion.
Now, you've made that point, and Mr. McIntosh suggested that could be the end of the matter. Can you respond to that?
It could be the end of the matter if you rule it that way, sir, but I was intending to ask a few more questions to wrap this up. It will not be much longer, but there are one or two more issues.
So one thing that arises from Mr. Steele's observations, I'm grateful for him being clear. If it's the case that Mr. Steele is seeking to suggest that some, or indeed all, or any number, and I have not done a count, of public comments that were made should have some less weight, then that issue has not been raised in his appeal statement. And those people have not had an opportunity to come forward and express their views. And I would say that's entirely a matter that's never been part of this appeal. There's been no fair notice, and that's not an area where anybody is entitled to go, because those objectors or supporters, and I'm sure there are many of both flavour, have not had the chance to respond.
Might I add one final thing, I hope, on this topic, this sorry saga? Dr. Disley's presentation used only the appellant's evidence. If Dr. Disley made any comment that it was on the hoof immediately following Mr. Wilkinson's presentation. But can I just be absolutely clear about this, sir, that at no point has the AHSS used those publications or those visualisations by Mr. Wilkinson other than when posting on its own website all of the presentations from that meeting. And immediately upon Mr. Orr contacting Ms. Pearce, they were taken down immediately. I'm happy to lodge the email exchange which demonstrates that. I appreciate the point that Mr. Steele is making, but the difficulty that I have here, sir, is that I have had no notice, let alone any fair notice.
So I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that would assist. There's no criticism of any description of the AHSS as a result of this issue. None at all for the meeting at Toll Cross.
Well, I think, sir, I will take Mr. Steele at his word on that. If, however, there is criticism levelled by Mr. Steele in his closing submission to that extent, I'd reserve the right to revisit it should we wish.
That's fair enough. We're dealing with things here that are not in the evidence. We're looking at a meeting. I don't think anyone submitted any notes or minutes of that, as far as I can recall. We've got a document you're talking about, an image that we haven't seen.
Sir, we have advisedly not submitted the image. If you wish to see it, it is available, but I'm not making any such motion about it because I was expecting and hoping, as I am doing, to deal with the matter in cross-examination.
Okay. Well, you've clearly made the point. I will allow you to continue, but if it's more of the same, then I think we'll just have to call a halt to it.
Yes, indeed, sir, absolutely. And indeed, I will not be taking much time. Mr. Wilkinson, you had attended a number of the workshops in relation to this issue. Is that so?
That's correct. I attended a series of workshops. I think I attended 6 or 7 out of the total of 8 or 9 in total.
And you had been opposed or hostile almost throughout. Is that correct?
That is not correct, no. We went into the workshops with an open mind as to what could be achieved in supporting reconsiderations of aspects of design and testing and changing elements of the design. And they were cooperative up until around the 5th workshop.
So at or about the 5th workshop, you became opposed to the proposals for whatever reason I'm not asking you about, but just as a matter of fact.
I think it's important to give a little bit of context to that. At around the 5th workshop, it became clear that the hotel, the quantum of development required, would be around 140 rooms or so. For the previous 5 years of engagement with the developer, it had not been clear how many rooms would be required on site, whether it was 60 or 200. And clearly, that's an extremely important fact, the quantum of development, in understanding what the site is capable of taking for that use.
So could you just remind me when the 5th workshop was?
There were, I think, 4 workshops at Duddingston House, and then there were 2 or 3 further ones in the Chief Executive's office at City of Edinburgh Council.
And during these workshops, the scale, the format and the massing of the buildings would have been discussed in some detail to a greater or lesser extent. Is that so?
So during the workshops, different versions of what a scale and massing might look like were explored steadily. I think it was around about the 4th workshop where we started to explore models in some detail and what the different massings might look like from the Costa del Sol version through to slightly different versions. Yeah.
And when, just remind me, what was the date of the 5th workshop?
I'm trying to recall. Bear with me just a moment. I'll look into my notes and see if I can. I think it was December of that month, sorry, of that year.
Which year was that?
Bear with me just a moment, please. So there's one scheduled for the 10th of December, which was cancelled. There's one before that on the 25th of November. So the best my recollection is it was at that meeting.
Which year is that, Mr.
2014.
2014. So over a period of years, you had discussions which were relating particularly to height, scale and massing and design and the like, culminating in the 5th workshop in the tail end of 2014.
The discussions over height, scale and massing were in the workshop sessions in 2014. Up to that point, there had been general discussions about the nature of the hill and about the possibility of a hotel development there, but at no time was particular clarity given over the height, scale and massing.
And did you attend any meetings prior to the lodging of the 2nd application?
I wrote to Mr. Mapping asking for a consultation, and no opportunity was given to consult with the applicants.
But the short point is this, Mr. Wilkinson, over a period of years, you were aware of the likely nature of the proposals, weren't you?
We were aware of there was going to be a proposal solidifying and coming forward for a hotel on that site. We had no idea of the scale or massing because we had no indication of the room numbers until nearly 2015, 5 years on from our initial contact.
And in addition to which, you carried out a detailed analysis of the 1st application, did you not?
Yes,
And you knew where the viewpoints were for the first scheme?
Knew where the viewpoints were for the first scheme, yes.
See, does it not make it even more difficult to understand then how this was a genuine, innocent mistake to have falsified the images for the second scheme?
It was an honest mistake. That is as far as I can go with this, which I've apologised for, this inquiry. And on reflection, I wouldn't have done.
And do you also accept that you had the accurate montages available to you?
Had I had additional time to go through the very large number of documents in significant detail, I would have found an image which would have served my purpose.
Well, that's really the point, Mr. Wilkinson. Would it really have served your purpose to have an accurate image? That's the question.
I believe it would have served my purposes to have had a more accurate image, just as effectively.
Now, let us turn to another matter or two, if we may.
Sure.
This is a building which, as a matter of fact, is on the building at risk register. Is that correct?
That's correct.
It is a vacant building.
It has been vacant for, 2-3 years now. Up to that point, it had been in a range of different uses, including use by Essential Edinburgh and others, during which time it was heated and maintained.
Sorry to interrupt. Do you recall the date that it was put on the register?
I don't know.
That's okay. Yeah, I know it'll be on there.
Just as a matter of interest, the Scottish Civic Trust, when it was doing the surveys for the register, did consult with us over all potential buildings within the World Heritage Site. And I don't recall it not being there, if that helps at all.
Just trying to get an answer to your question, sir, when it was first put on the register.
Well, I can look it up. It's just while I was there.
We'll come back to that in that case. It is also, Mr. Wilkinson, one of the most important buildings in Scotland, is it not?
That is correct.
Do you think it is unfortunate that one of the most important buildings in Scotland should be on the Buildings at Risk register?
I think it's unfortunate, but I think it's understandable. The register serves a number of purposes, one of which is to highlight upcoming issues with important buildings.
So we can agree that it's unfortunate?
We can agree that it's unfortunate, yes.
And that one should be trying to take such reasonable steps as one can to have it removed from that register, should one not?
One should take reasonable steps. In my experience of working with buildings at risk, it's often a case of waiting for the right use to come along for a building where it's in a reasonable state. And there are examples I could cite to this inquiry, if helpful, of where there have been proposals which have been inappropriate for buildings, which have been put forward, yet an alternative use has come forward shortly thereafter which has been more appropriate to that building.
Well, I'm not sure that's the question I asked you, Mr. Wilkinson, but if we could just move on to the questions that I'm about to ask you.
Of course.
Could we look, please, at ENV1 of the local plan?
Yeah. I don't have a copy of the whole text on me, it'd be helpful.
No, well, if you just look at page 7 of your report, that would be sufficient.
The shortened version there, of course.
You have that?
One's not actually quoted in there.
Well, it is in my version at page 7.
No, that's the operational guidelines
Sorry.
I've quoted there.
Apologies. Can we look at the operational guidelines?
Of course, I will need a copy of those if possible.
What, Mr. Wilkinson, I'm asking you about is what you have written in your proof of evidence at page 7.
Yes, it's there. It'd be great to see the context of the operational guidelines if possible.
In which you say ENV1 sets a framework which is wholly in line with the operational guidelines, and you refer to paragraph 96. Can we look at that, please?
Yes, I've got that. I would very appreciate having operational guidelines in front of me while we do this.
CD 454.
Thank you, that's great. That's the local plan. The operational guidelines are a different number.
If I look at your proof of evidence Mr Wilkinson, next to the operational guidelines you have got note 57, and the footnote 57 is CD 454.
It also has CD 520 after that as well.
And it's 520
there
that...
we go. My apologise.
Right.
My apologies.
So you want to look at 520, do
It
you?
would be useful to have that for any context of whatever question you may want to ask. I don't know if I'm going to need that or not, so keep that there just in case. Pile them high.
Now, for my purposes, I'm content to look at what you've set out here, Mr Wilkinson. Yeah. Protection and management of World Heritage properties should ensure that their outstanding universal value, including conditions of integrity and or authenticity at the time of inscription, are sustained or enhanced over time.
Yes.
And may we agree that this is an important building within the World Heritage Site?
I think we're all agreed that this plays an important role within World Heritage Site and reflects different aspects of outstanding universal value.
And so far as the main Hamilton building is concerned, we are trying to protect it and indeed manage that property, aren't we?
The building, as I mentioned earlier, cannot be separated from its setting. And the proposals that the appellants have come forward with are, in our view, damaging to the setting and therefore to the understanding of the cultural significance of this building.
Well, I understand very clearly, Mr Wilkinson, the points that you're trying to get across, but could you please just concentrate on this question? So far as the fabric of the main Hamilton building is concerned, are we seeking to protect it and manage it? A simple yes or no will do.
It's a little more complex than that. As in terms of the management, we don't have fully established who's managing. That's a question I believe is still up for question and the enforcement of that as well. In terms of the fabric, the plans clearly involve conservation of elements. It also involves the removal of elements as well.
Well, let me put the precise wording to you again. So far as the fabric of the structure is concerned, and I'm talking about the main Hamilton building, are we seeking to protect it and manage it?
You're seeking to protect that, but you do damage to the setting of the building as well, in our view.
Just to, if
and
you could,
cannot separate the two of them. They are absolutely inextricably linked.
Mr Wilkinson, if you could please just answer the question. So far as the fabric of the structure is concerned, do we agree that we will be both protecting it and managing it?
That we can salami slice until the cows come home on this. And in the round, including that setting, that's not what happens. Now, the physical interventions in the building will do some damage to the fabric. Aspects of the fabric will be hidden by new build as well, and the setting will be, in effect, removed.
Well, could you please just answer the question, Mr Wilkinson? So far as the fabric of the structure is concerned, will we not be protecting it and managing it?
The fabric of the structure will be conserved. The framework for the protection and management of the structure in the longer term is not, I believe, yet clear.
Thank you. Now, continuing with this paragraph, so far as integrity and authenticity is concerned, are we not seeking to achieve that as well, so far as the fabric of the main Hamilton building is concerned?
It's an authenticity and integrity of those values. The values aren't just the fabric, they go way beyond that. And the integrity of the values are around teaching, they're around that Athenian notion that I mentioned earlier as well. And I don't believe those are being sustained or enhanced over time.
Well, if I can restrict the question to the question of the fabric, is it not the case that the authenticity of the fabric is being largely, if not entirely, preserved and conserved by our proposal
well, that's
of the main Hamilton building?
That's not then relevant to paragraph 96 of the operational guidelines because that's not a World Heritage matter. The World Heritage matter is about the OUV, which covers physical and also the cultural as well. So you can't put it in that way within a World Heritage frame.
Did you just say it related to the physical issues?
Consider it physical and the cultural. The two are intertwined, fundamentally intertwined.
Let me just ask you about the physical issues then. So far as the physical issues are concerned, we are seeking to preserve and conserve the integrity and the authenticity, aren't we?
Seek to conserve the authenticity of the physical fabric of the building, regardless of its cultural and other values that are relevant to outstanding universal value. So that's quite a caveat for you. This scheme would conserve large elements of the fabric. It would also remove elements of fabric as well. In thinking about the removal of elements of fabric, I'd refer back to my earlier discussion around significance and levels of significance in a building and where those elements of fabric are being removed from.
So that if one looks at paragraph 96,
yes,
as you have done here, Mr. Wilkinson, it is obvious, isn't it, that parts of this, maybe not its entirety, but parts of this are actually supportive of our proposals?
No, because we're talking about salami slicing this down to the physical fabric. World Heritage Outstanding Universal Value covers more than just the physical fabric. It covers
yes,
cultural values as well.
But it also covers the physical values, does it not?
The architectural value, the architectural expression, is included within it, but you can't separate these out completely. There are still elements of OUV here which will be harmed through the interventions to the building and its setting. Mr.
Wilkinson, I'm not suggesting to you otherwise. What I'm suggesting to you that we actually gain some support from a proper, fair evaluation of this paragraph.
Conditions. Outstanding universal value. No, because it says ensure that their outstanding universal value, including the conditions of integrity and authenticity. It doesn't separate out integrity and authenticity as separate things. It takes them as a whole. And it...
Mr. Wilkinson, is it too difficult to accept that one of the most important buildings in Scotland, and therefore one of the most important buildings in the World Heritage Site, if it is to be brought back to use and conserved and preserved, so far as the main building is concerned, that there must be some advantages from that in respect of the relevant policies set out there, both in the SPP and paragraph 96 that you've referred to? Surely that must be so.
There is a balance of what cost, which I think was discussed earlier, and the cost from the scheme which is proposed is simply too high, and the buildings themselves are also too high as well.
That wasn't, again, Mr. Wilkinson, the question. This is a balancing exercise. Can you not accept, as the Director of World Heritage, to whom we've agreed principles of not overstating and not understating and being fair and honest apply, can you not accept that it is obvious that there are some advantages in terms of a fair evaluation of the SPP that you quote here and paragraph 96 that you quote here, some benefits arising from our proposal?
Just a moment, Mr. Steele, I'm not sure the SPP is being quoted. I read this as a reference to the operational guidelines. It may be a...
SPP is quoted half a dozen lines further up.
All right,
I'm trying to save time.
Sorry, you're going with your question.
I've quite forgotten it, Mr. Wilkinson, as a result of that objection or intervention.
I'm struggling, Mr. Wilkinson. If you're analysing the impact, is that not something that you must do, looking at different aspects and then balancing them out together at the end? Is that not how the process works?
So, yes.
You just take a global view from the beginning.
When you look at the significance, look at the different significances of the physical fabric, but also the cultural values attached to it and the setting as well. The physical fabric doesn't sit in isolation.
I fully understand what you're saying there, but in order to analyse it, do you not look at the physical fabric and see what's happening there and then move on and look at other aspects and then you bring the whole lot together? Is that not how you make an analysis?
Yeah, that is how we do an analysis. Yeah.
I'm very grateful for that, sir. And if that's the way to analyse it, Mr. Wilkinson, is it not obvious that so far as the physical fabric is concerned and reusing the building, there are certain advantages consistent with the SPP, which you've set out there, and paragraph 96? That must be so, surely.
That particular aspect of the proposal takes steps towards this. I wouldn't say it is the ultimate example or the best example, particularly when there's an alternative on the table.
So, Mr. Wilkinson, at last we're in agreement, are we?
I think we've reached something of an agreement here, yeah.
Good. Well, that's very good news indeed. Now, in assessing the proposal, you have not had access to, nor have you relied upon, the economic advantages of the proposal, have you?
No, we have not.
And nor have you placed reliance, as I understand it, on the viability of issues, and it may be you've not had access to that information, I don't know, but you have not been able to place reliance on viability issues.
They don't come into an assessment of impact on World Heritage status.
So economic issues are of no relevance, do you say, for the purposes of the World Heritage assessment?
For the purpose of the assessment of OUV, they're not. However, at committee, one of the members asked us about the value of the World Heritage site in relation to a study which we had carried out around 2012, which evidence will be given on later for the inquiry on the basis of that question.
And have you carried out a detailed evaluation in terms of the development plan here?
Only in terms of ENV1.
But you'll understand that there are many, many other policies that are relevant, which you have not mentioned.
There are many which are relevant. Others are covering those in detail in other parties.
Have you also considered this possibility, Mr. Wilkinson, that actually this development, if consented and if constructed, it would actually add to the World Heritage values? Have you considered that possibility?
I believe Ms Denyer answered that pretty clearly for you yesterday, and I would agree with her answer on that.
She didn't agree with me. I just wondered if by any chance our agreement could stretch to that as well.
I don't believe it can, no. It is not possible to change the World Heritage Site inscription without going through a full re-evaluation before the World Heritage Committee.
But you realise that others might take a different view and think that the building is so impressive that it entirely accords with the desires of the World Heritage inscription?
No, the inscription is set at 1995. That's the point where it was inscribed at, and those are the values we're inscribed for, not some future values or past imagined values, but at 1995.
And may I take you back to where I was with Ms Denyer in Barcelona yesterday? Yes, and I assume that you are familiar with Casa Milà.
It's not somewhere I visited, no.
I assume that since then you will have Googled it and looked it up.
I have to say, I haven't spent a great deal of time looking it up. I've noted that it is in hotel use.
You noted what, sorry?
That it's in hotel use, is that correct?
I'm not sure that it's entirely in hotel use. Perhaps that's a very good idea, Mr. Wilkinson. But,
perhaps for a very small and beautiful boutique hotel, yes.
Well, you've not been to the building. Do you know that it's far from small? And are you aware that the reasons for some of the locals objecting related to concern about the property values? Are you aware of that?
No, I'm really not aware of this case, I've got to say. I'm focused very much on our World Heritage site in Edinburgh and occasionally on our partner cities where they want to work together.
And is that an example of where, despite very, very significant public opposition when constructed, the building was appointed by UNESCO to be a World Heritage site?
I honestly couldn't say. I mean, values change over time in terms of the wider world. In terms of World Heritage, they are at that point of inscription. So I cannot comment on that case.
But you agree, if values change over time, it may well be that all sorts of awards will be heaped on this building if constructed. Wouldn't that be fair?
I don't think the future heritage argument really takes any pride of place here, as we're not able to time machine ourselves 30 or 40 years forward and judge whether a building will win prizes in the distant future or not.
You can't rule that out, can you? You can't rule that out.
It's an absurdity to rule anything out. Science doesn't let us do that by 99.9%.
You see, do you think it possible that this may be hailed, if consented, of course, this may be hailed as a perfect example of a way to save a very significant building like the Hamilton building, which has been without long-term beneficial use for about 50 years?
No, I don't think it would be. I don't think sticking a 6-storey extension on one side and a 5-storey extension on the other side of a Category A listed building that's, in effect, 2.5 storeys high would be seen as a brilliant way of rescuing it, nor would the damage done to its setting be seen as a brilliant way of rescuing it, even when there are alternatives around.
And you don't see that others may take a rather different view, that actually it adds to the setting by framing the building with spectacular architecture? You don't conceive of that possibility?
That would be adding a frame which is twice the width of the original portrait to the picture, which I think would be defeating the object. Frames are usually quite narrow things in my experience.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkinson. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Just a couple of questions from me.
Yeah.
Can you just tell me when you were involved with first became involved with the RHSPT scheme?
It would have been, I imagine, soon after they were formed. They would have contacted us to either via the council or directly to ask for some initial advice. Just check through my notes.
Well, that's good enough if that was the stage at which you were
But
involved.
yeah, I mean, we're governed by a formal protocol for engagement with the City of Edinburgh Council and Historic Environment Scotland.
Yeah.
So it's probably been through that. But they came to us very early, and we gave them exactly the same advice that we gave to DHP when they first approached us as well.
Okay, thank you. Just help me, I think you said, you implied in your recognition that, well, it may have been in your paper, anyway, you've implied that if a site is put on the danger list,
Yeah.
or is removed from the list,
Yeah.
there's reputational damage. Are there any other consequences?
It goes into the realm of international politics, and it's completely... so it's reputational. It means there'd be a sharper eye on the care of other World Heritage sites in the UK as well. It would... I mean, the first step would be to send a reactive monitoring mission to investigate what's going on in more detail and report back to ICOMOS and UNESCO. And the consideration of things going onto the endangered list happens at the World Heritage Committee, which is a political committee. It's not a committee of experts. It's advised by the experts, but has representatives from the state parties. So it then becomes, in effect, international politics and diplomacy, and way beyond anything anybody in this room could really do anything about.
And are there sites that have been removed from the list?
Only 2 have been removed from the list. They're very, very cautious about removal. There's a number on the endanger list. So one was by mutual consent, which was an oryx hatchery in Oman. And the other one was the Elbe Valley in Dresden, following the construction of a large bridge over the valley, which was deemed to have substantial negative impacts on the outstanding universal value of that site.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. McIntosh.
I've got no questions in re-examination.
In that case, thank you very much, Mr. Wilkinson.
Thank you.
Ms. McIntosh. When would you like to continue with your...
Well, Mr. Price wasn't available till tomorrow morning. So
tomorrow morning, then?
I don't... I mean, unless I'm putting words in Mr. Steele's mouth, I'm hoping we will be finished by lunchtime, Mr. Price and Mr. Leventhal. But that's the order I'm proposing to go with, unless it's a gross inconvenience.
No,
Can I just confirm, sir, the witnesses in order for tomorrow, obviously, Mr. Price and Mr. Leventhal. Then we have, I think, no, she's not here, I don't think, is she? Miss Nimmo and possibly Miss MacDonald, but not Mr. Harrison.
Not Mr. Harrison.
Is that the intention?
That's as we understand it, yes. And that there are initial indications of that will all be dealt with tomorrow.
I believe it will be dealt with tomorrow, so I'm just checking that was the extent of it.
Okay. In that case, then, we will resume tomorrow at 10 a.m. Thank you.